good. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Today is December 13th, 2022, and the regularly scheduled meeting of the Beverly Planning Board is hereby called to order. A note for board members as well as the general public, anybody watching from home. We have been asked to better watch our time and to see if we can conclude by 10 o'clock on a regular basis if we continue to meet here. So we will make every effort to be done by 10 o'clock tonight. Okay, that being said, let's begin. Our first agenda item is number 1, subdivision approval not required plans. The property is located at 451 Essex Street and 114 Stanley Street. The applicant is Fazio Enterprises, Randolph S. and Jean B. Earl, and it looks like Mr. Bob Griffin is here representing them. Take it away, Mr. Griffin.
Good evening. This is a pretty straightforward A&R application. We're conveying approximately 1,600 square feet of wetlands from one property owner to another. It has no effect on frontage or buildability or anything like that, so just a simple private property transaction.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Griffin? You all should have, the plan should be in your Google Doc, your Google Drive, and I believe it's up on the screen right now. And it's going to who? The owner of the, is it the owner, is it 453, 455? Is that who it's being transferred to?
So the Fazio Enterprises owns both the 453, 455 parcel and the parcel to the lower part of the page from that, which is 451 Essex Street. But you're right, that's the party that's receiving the 1,600 square feet.
Okay, and that little sliver is being transferred to them?
From Earl
Yep,
on Stanley Street to Fazio on Essex Street.
okay. Is 451 on the map? Because I can't find it.
It's the large parcel that has the sewer easement running through the middle of it.
Map 71, Lot 10 is 451.
Oh, okay. I don't think it's identified. That's why I had trouble. Okay. Okay, obviously doesn't change any access to either parcel.
Right.
Okay. Are there any further questions for Mr. Griffin? Okay, hearing none, I'd welcome a motion on this, please. Ms. Flannery?
Madam Chair, I move to endorse the subdivision approval not required
Microphone.
plan. Oh,
Thank you.
Sorry, Kim. I move to endorse the subdivision approval not required plan for 451 Essex Street and 114 Stanley Street. The applicant Fazio Enterprises, Randolph S. and Jean B. Earl.
I have a motion by Ms. Flannery. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Miller. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rodney's not on yet.
Our next agenda item is the request for construction completion extension to June 6, 2024 for the definitive subdivision plan for Livingston Avenue improvements. The applicant is 7 Porter Terrace, LLC. Just give me just a minute, Mr. Griffin. I gotta find my notes. There we are. Okay. Mr. Griffin, you appearing on behalf of
7 Porter. Yes, I am.
All right.
Pretty straightforward application. You may recall that the planning board accepted a bond from 7 Porter earlier this year in the amount of $38,000 approximately to do the binder paving, the final paving and the sidewalks and finishing out the subdivision construction. Since that time, the binder course has gone down. That went down in, I believe, August or early September. And his construction completion date ends December 15th. So we filed this request in November to extend it for a year and a half to make it coincident with the end of the bond. House construction has not started at the subdivision yet. There's been a holdup with the National Grid getting power out to the lots. But a deal has been struck between the developer and a builder to build the two houses as soon as the power is available. So we expect that to take about a year. We decided to leave a little bit of margin in there for unexpected events and make the request a year and a half, again, coincident with the end of the bond.
Okay, are there questions for Mr. Griffin, please? Eric?
So was this a surprise, the delay from National Grid in order to move construction along? I mean, you had a schedule of December 15th. It seems like it was a pretty definitive date.
Well, I think we knew earlier this year that we were going to request an extension, and obviously we did that on November 1st. There have been some delays on the getting the National Grid out there, though.
Mr. Griffin, are you all set, Derek? I'm sorry.
I was.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I apologize. I was delayed. It just seems like a year and a half is a long time. I understand that, in terms of being driven by other people's schedules. But is there a way for us to perhaps have a check-in that's not a year and a half from now, but something that's more regular? Like 6 months, for example?
It's fine.
Well, let me ask you, Mr. Griffin, have you seen the recommendations from the engineering department?
So I received an email at 4:30 this afternoon with some concerns being expressed by the engineering department. I took a drive out there. I certainly disagree with most of that memorandum from the engineering department, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to meet with them on site to discuss it. I would remind you that Mr. Marks, the developer, has been, I think, completely cooperative with the city throughout this process. He's done absolutely everything that's been asked of him, and he continues to want to be cooperative with the city. So we've got no problems with him.
Okay, well, then, do you disagree that there are silt sacks in the catch basins?
No, what I disagree with is the statement in the memo where it says that the binder is going to be harmed by soil, drifting onto it. First, I went out there and I don't see significant amount of soil on the pavement, and of course, I'm reminded that pavement is made of gravel and asphalt. It's certainly not going to be harmed by some dirt falling on it. The city sends trucks around spreading dirt on roads all the time. So I have a number of concerns about this memo. I think that it's a little unclear as to what exactly they're driving at. But, we have an approved subdivision plan. We have a bond in place. And up to this point, I think things have gone reasonably well. So, again, I think we can work with the city to resolve any concerns about the site conditions.
May I? I think,
Please.
just as I had the conversation with the engineering department, the concern is that it's not final pavement, it's binder course. And binder course isn't meant to be left unexposed and open for a long period of time. And so therefore, they were looking for protections of the binder course because it can degrade more quickly and then if it were to be paved over, it would be an insufficient subsurface to the pavement.
Yeah, so we obviously put binder course on road construction projects all the time. We drive construction traffic over it all the time. And then we clean the surface before we put down the final pavement. But we intentionally have this break between binder and final paving so that the trucks don't damage the final paving. So this is the normal way that roads and subdivisions in Beverly are built, and we're not looking for anything different.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Griffin. One of the engineering department's recommendations is that the owner reinstate all erosion control measures and add erosion control measures around the entire property and all open areas, including the retaining wall. Do you have a problem with that?
I do. So again, we have an approved subdivision plan. We have an erosion control plan that is part of that document, and all of those erosion controls have been installed. Now, there may have fallen down in a few locations, and certainly there may be a need to make some repairs in certain locations. But when I went out there this evening, I did not see significant erosion happening anywhere. So I would suggests that the idea that we should encircle the entire development and roads with additional erosion controls is unnecessary. And I'd like to, again, have that conversation with the engineering department's author to go over that.
Okay, the engineering department's second recommendation is that the owner fully sweep the roadway now prior to any significant snowfall and every 6 months thereafter or as directed by the engineering department. Does that present a concern to you?
Yeah, it does. There's no significant amount of dirt or sand on that subdivision roadway today, so I don't see the need to sweep it. There's a little bit of dirt where a neighbor has done some landscaping. A man in a push broom could clean that up in less than 5 minutes. But other than that one spot, I didn't see a need to do any sweeping of the subdivision.
Okay, the third recommendation from the engineering department, and I would say that they have said together with the planning director, just to make sure I'm clear on that. Number 3 says that the owner remove the silt sacks in the catch basins and remove any and all debris from the catch basins. Do you have an issue with that?
Well, there's certainly no need to remove the debris from the catch basin since it's caught inside at the bottom of those basins right now. And I think the silt sacks are probably keeping some amount of debris from getting into the catch basins. I don't really see the need to remove the silt sacks at this point in time. And the next recommendation is that we lower the grades of the structures. Again, I haven't seen any significant erosion out there, so I don't see the need to lower the structures at this time, and I don't see the need to change the silt sacks.
Okay, so you basically have significant concerns with the 4 conditions or recommendations that the engineering department has made.
I do, and I think it's unfair to launch this on me, at 4:30 before a meeting after this, the road's been paved since August. Our application for a construction extension went in beginning of November. So I think it's very prejudicial to release that information a couple hours before I come to a meeting here without the opportunity to review this matter with the engineering department. So again, the planning board has a bond to finish the road construction. We've got competent contractors working out there. I think the extension request is very reasonable. We're happy to continue to work with the city as we have to date, but to suggest that there's anything extraordinary going on there or any significant issues is just not correct.
Well, I appreciate that. My concern is that, speaking for myself, these matters are beyond my pay grade, as we say, and that I rely upon the engineering department to make these type of recommendations. So I'm reluctant, to be frank with you, to go against what they've recommended.
Well, I think you deserve better information. You deserve more timely information. You're getting this a couple hours before the meeting as well, and it's putting you in a tough spot. We've got a construction completion deadline that ends December 15th. I'm happy to come back in 6 months and give you an update. I'll come back every 6 months and give you an update. But there's no significant problems out there with the construction work that has been completed or the condition of the roadway right now.
I would just add, if I may, I think the concern that we're trying to address with the catch basins is stormwater management, which is not currently functioning and will not be functioning for a year and a half if the catch basins are raised.
Again, there's no significant erosion going on there.
It's not about erosion, it's
It
about
is
water
Well, that's the
flow
purpose of the drainage system, is to prevent erosion.
and to prevent stormwater from running off the site.
Stormwater has been running off that site for probably 1,000 years. And again, I don't see any silt or any damage being caused by the current condition. Again, I'm happy to discuss this with the engineering department. I'm happy to, do whatever really needs to be done, but I don't think the memo is accurate.
Other questions? Yes, Wayne?
So Mr. Griffin suggests that the engineer's report is at best questionable and that it might in fact demonstrate incompetence and that the planning board is prejudicial? Is that what I take away from this discussion?
Well,
I think you're putting words in my mouth that
Yeah,
I didn't say. So let's just say that I'm looking forward to the opportunity to speak to the engineering department on site to look at the condition of the site, and we're happy to make whatever repairs are reasonable and necessary.
Yeah, I guess I share the chairperson's concern that I'm wondering about our engineering department at this point because it's certainly in question. This is concerning to me. What are our options?
Well, the option is that we can give the applicant the remedy they desire, we can deny the remedy that the applicant has asked for, or that there's some compromise position, such as what has been suggested, which is that we extend it for 6 months, and then they can come back in again. And that certainly will give them ample time to address the issues with between the engineering department and the applicant.
But that would then be 6 months to not address the concerns that the engineer has expressed.
Well,
I think we would address it sooner than that. I
Yeah,
just think
because the
that the
applicant would
report
have
to you
to
would be
come
due in
back.
6 months.
I'm sorry, Mr. Griffin. The applicant would have to come back in 6 months for another extension, so they're going to have to address it.
What is this, why is it 6 months?
Doesn't have to be 6 months, could be 8 months, could be 3 months, could be 2 months.
I defer to
Could be
my
9
colleague
months.
to the left.
George?
Yeah, I'm just curious, pardon me. So what I'm hearing, Mr. Griffin, is that you don't like the conditions that have been put together. So if we were to go as we've kind of been proposing with 6 months with these conditions, that's, unacceptable on your end. I wonder if a shorter extension with contingent with, ongoing discussions with the engineering department, and that way we have a decision point that is a little bit closer, where if, that way everyone has more time to digest this. We're not putting strict conditions on you tonight, but we're continuing that conversation with the engineering department. I wonder if that might be a compromise.
I'm happy to come back, next month, 3 months, you name it.
I'll name it. How about next month?
Well, Mr. Griffin, does that give you sufficient time to have a meaningful conversation with the engineering department, especially given the fact holidays, I'm presuming vacation sometimes thrown in there? Is that sufficient time?
I think, I thought 6 months was reasonable. I think 3 months is reasonable. I'll do whatever you think is reasonable.
Your construction completion date is December 15th, 2022, so we have to do something today.
Yeah, so I mean, you
Extend-
you could
extend-
effectively
Extend it a
issuing
month.
like temporary, extension in order to resolve the issues, and then with the intent that there would be a longer extension afterwards, once those are resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So Darlene, when you say a temporary extension, I mean, by virtue, if we did 3 months, for example, that's temporary almost in and of itself,
Yeah.
right? So if we did a 3-month extension to give parties time to meet, look at everything, then everyone should have time to breathe and come back. And at that point, we can look at the longer situation. So I'd recommend 3 months personally.
Sarah?
The winter will be almost over. Is there any reason to be concerned about it hanging through the winter? I don't know I'm reading the comment letter from the neighbors who are obviously really concerned. I look to Darlene, again, this is also not my expertise, but does the fact that the snow will happen in the next 3 months impact whether it's 1 month, 3 months?
I think the engineering department's comment was if nothing is done, then it's better to just leave the snow and not even plow it, so that you're not damaging the castings, that would be a solution as an alternative. So I don't think that's going to significantly, if the binder course degrades, then it would have to be repaired due to snow.
And likewise, if the castings were damaged by snow plowing activities, they would have to be repaired. You guys have a bond, the amount of the bond is ample, and any damage that's caused during construction has to be fixed. So I really see no risk to the city at all here.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Griffin? Yes, Wayne?
Just one, and there's no reflection on the applicant, but what's the problem with National Grid?
Well, we were on the schedule to get the power lines installed, I think, in September or October. The city solicitor decided that she didn't like the overhead wires that were proposed in front of the city's vacant lot, and she wouldn't allow the easement request to go to the city council until a plan change was made. Now, I would remind you, these are overhead wires that were shown on the plan approved by the planning board. But this, this basically stopped National Grid from working, and so now we're back trying to get on their schedule now that the pole has been relocated, at least on paper, and the city solicitor is satisfied with the location of the pole, and so now the city council has signed the easement necessary to get National Grid out there.
Thank you for that clarification.
Oh, Sarah?
Is that it sounds like neighbors have a lot of questions about what's going on, and is that what you would want them to know about what's caused delay?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the neighbor's email in which, there's some aspersions cast as to the financial solvency of the applicant. That's not an issue at all. It never has been, and so I think there's some wild speculation going on that's just, harmful and inaccurate.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, that we've been asked to, the applicant has asked us to extend the construction date to June 6, 2024. There's been discussion about a 3-month extension.
March 15th?
What's the,
March 15th, 2023?
would you like to formulate that in terms of a motion?
I will.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move to grant the request to extend the construction completion date for the definitive subdivision plan Livingston Avenue Extension, the applicant 7 Porter Terrace LLC, to March 15, 2023.
I'm sorry, March.
March 15, 2023.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Beckwith. Is there discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
I apologize. Do we want to add any condition, or are we just going to throw it out? Okay.
It gives him the 3 months, it gives the applicant, sorry, Mr. Griffin, gives the applicant 3 months to talk to the engineering department, see what they want to do, see what they can work out. He comes before us in 3 months. We can see the engineering department still has these concerns. So it gives them some time to work it out.
Sure. I wasn't suggesting these verbatim, but
Yeah.
we could have formulated something else. But if it's just 3 months and we think that's fine by me too.
Okay, I'm going to, all in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Extension's granted to March 15th, 2023.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is our 2023 Planning Board meeting schedule. And we need this because we have to start planning some public hearings for the, for the new year. You should have a schedule in front of you.
I'll give you a little just context of how
Please.
I have extra copies too. Wayne, if you need any. A few years ago, so generally the planning board has met, the schedule has been every third Tuesday. We are one of the few planning boards of a community of our size that meet once a month rather than twice a month. So a few years ago, we made an effort to add a couple extra meetings in. We didn't find that meeting every 2 weeks was really useful, but it could, adding a few meetings kind of helps to offset the load a little bit. And so it's really just one meeting in the spring and one meeting in the fall for a 14-meeting schedule. Trying to keep space between meetings as well as away from other conflicting meetings that we have to avoid. So the right column is kind of what I suggested, moving to, generally, if there's a holiday, city council moves from Monday to Tuesday, so we move to Wednesday. There is an instance where I moved us to Monday, which I wanted to flag because I was trying to avoid Valentine's Day. I don't know. I just feel like cruel to do that, but I know. Yeah, and then there's another Monday. The only thing I will, flag, as long as city council's regular, which they're not currently scheduled to meet on those days, so it should be sufficient. I avoid vacation weeks and big holiday weeks, so it's just kind of like fitting those in. The only day, Tuesday, November 21st, I was recommending, but that is the Thanksgiving week, so the alternative would be to have it on the 14th in case, to avoid that week.
And do we need to decide that tonight, or can we keep that flexible
We
until?
don't necessarily, we don't have to. We could leave it in as an option.
Okay, let's do that. Any questions, comments about the proposed schedule? I think it's just going to require us to pay a little bit more attention to our schedules, because it's no longer every third
It's not the
Tuesday.
third Tuesday, yeah. Which-
And I think that's directed at me, basically, really, truly at me.
Motion now?
Okay, so if there's no questions, comments on it, I would welcome a motion on this.
Madam Chair, I move to adopt the suggested schedule for the Beverly Planning Board for 2023, which totals 14 meetings.
And second?
All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. I'd welcome a motion to recess for public hearings, please.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We're in public hearing. Our next, or our first public hearing is the continuation of the public hearing regarding recommendation to the City Council on proposed amendments to the Beverly zoning ordinance. Various articles related to building heights and inclusionary housing was submitted by the planning director.
I had, sorry. A couple of comments that were requested to be read into the record,
Okay?
or at least one was requested to be read. I can read the other one. This is a letter from Stephen Moffett, dated December 12th. With respect to the proposed zoning changes, I would be against capping the heights of buildings in the area to 45 feet, especially if the first floor is being used for commercial space. Beyond that, however, I appreciate Councilor Rand's statement that new housing shouldn't be limited to Ward 2. I think this process is a great time to revisit residential zoning. It doesn't seem productive to restrict multifamily residential or even duplexes within the city. We have plenty of duplexes and even a handful of three-family homes in Ryleside, and I don't see that as detrimental to the character of our neighborhood. It is odd to think throughout Beverly you could build a 6-bedroom, 2,700 square foot single-family home without issue, but are forbidden from adding some locks and splitting it up into 3 900 square foot apartments. If the purpose of the proposed changes to zoning are to help mitigate the concerns of the perceived effects of the continued development of mid-rise buildings, then the answer we should actually be looking towards is expanding the RMD zone across the city and allowing the organic growth of the missing middle and give residents options besides large single-family homes or large apartment buildings. In quotes, in parentheticals, 5 ways to make the missing middle less missing, strongtowns.org, end parenthetical. Through many of the public input meetings for zoning in general and for particular projects, we have heard residents point out the struggle for affordability they see for their children and how this is growing into resentment towards the developers of these large projects. Lower scale multifamily housing across the city would start us on the course to building a stock of locally owned apartments and condos and develop a better pathway to ownership for all residents. Thank you for your time and consideration. 32 Eastern Ave. And then the other, a letter from Councilor Scott Hausman, received today, December 13th, 2022, on continued public hearing on Order 279. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please accept this letter as additional public comment for the continued public hearing on proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance, Order 279. I have a conflicting meeting tonight and need to attend the city's financial forecasting committee as a member. Accordingly, I am submitting this letter rather than appearing before you. I am writing in my capacity as an individual city councilor, not on behalf of the council. Conceptually, changing the maximum building height and affordable housing requirements is straightforward, but considering how best to implement technical details so they further the intent of such proposals is a challenge. I say this having 16 years' experience applying the ordinance as a member of Beverly's Zoning Board of Appeals, 10 years as its chair. I will be submitting to the City Council proposed amendments to Order 279 as outlined below. These amendments are not in final form and in some cases are stated in the alternative. However, I think each of the concepts they express deserve deliberation on their merits by your board and the City Council. I met today with Planning Director Darlene Wynn to discuss these amendments, and we reviewed their substance to some degree and the procedure for their consideration. You may wish to consider keeping the public hearing open in order to facilitate discussion on these amendments. The first amendment would implement the following. Within the core pedestrian area of CC2 for commercial and residential uses or mixed uses, a maximum building height of 35 feet with no more than 3 stories. See attachment with current CPA provisions. And by saying CPA stands for core pedestrian area in that case. The second amendment would implement the following. Within the CC2 for commercial and residential uses or mixed uses of a maximum building height of 35 feet with no more than 3 stories. The third amendment would implement the following. Within the CC2 for commercial and residential uses or mixed uses of a maximum building height of 35 feet with no more than 3 stories, provided, however, that the planning board may allow a special permit for a maximum building height of 45 feet with no more than 4 stories, where the additional height would result in additional affordable housing units according to the following formula. Parentheses, suggested formula to be provided by the planning department, end parentheses. The fourth amendment would implement the following. A, retain the current threshold number of 6 units, removing the proposed Order 279 change to 4 units in Section 300-103 applicability. B, change to 14% from the present 12% for Section 300-104A, housing affordability, A1, housing affordability. The rationale for the Fourth Amendment is twofold. First, to address the issue raised at the public hearing that the current proposal will create an economic incentive to build fewer rather than more units of housing in small new developments and rehab projects in existing buildings. Second, while the smaller developments would be largely unaffected by the change in percentage to 14%, in larger developments there would be a corresponding increase in required affordable housing units. The result would be more affordable housing than would otherwise be the case in larger developments while preserving the incentive for more market rate housing generally in smaller build-outs. Respectfully, Scott Houseman, City Councilor, Ward 4. I don't think I need to read the actual red line to reference them. But I will if you want me to.
No, that's okay. I have a question, Darlene. It's more procedural than anything else. We have before us tonight a specific zoning ordinance changes that's been proposed by you. The amendments, how does that work with respect to what we've been asked to do? Our job is to make a recommendation to the city council.
Mm-hmm.
And I presume our recommendation is to, or our job is to make a recommendation based upon the zoning ordinance changes that you have proposed. Not necessarily what the amendments have been proposed,
Correct.
because they're not before us.
Correct. You can make a recommendation. You can make your own suggestions. You can take, pieces that you think you've heard and you might want to modify. So you can suggest and send back as a recommendation to City Council something that's slightly different from what I presented, or what I submitted. But just knowing that anything that is more stringent than what was in the zoning amendment that I presented would require restarting the process with a new legal ad, new public notice.
More stringent.
Yes.
Okay, and
So for example, lowering the height to 35 feet
Is
instead
more
of 45
stringent.
feet is more stringent. But keeping the affordability threshold at 6 units instead of 4 is less stringent and would, in our opinion, not require renoticing.
okay.
So, but yes, but you can make a recommendation, I think to your original point, you can make a recommendation that might vary from what I submitted.
Okay.
I have a question about that. In terms of the stringent litmus test, isn't stringency in the eyes of the beholder? Or if you're saying that, is it, you're viewing that being more restrictive at 35 feet as opposed to yours at 45 feet, for example?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything that's kind of increasing,
So it'd be
The
from
change.
the view, the restrictive in terms of shorter or costlier, things like that?
yeah, another way to think about it is, and then those are not elements that I'm thinking, it's a greater change from the change that I proposed. So I'm not thinking about it
Okay.
from a cost perspective or from a, hardship perspective. It's a larger change than the change that was proposed in my amendment.
I think of it as analogous to the scenario where you're not, if you had some kind of variance or something, or it was a rebuildability issue with a particular piece of property, you're not increasing the nonconformity. It's sort of akin to that. Like if you're not making it worse, then it's not more stringent, right? If you're not making it more, the impediment more.
Impeding?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I
Those are
understand.
hard for me.
I understand that. I really understand it, and I understood what you were trying to get to. I just wanted, for purpose of discussion, is to put out there, what do we mean by stringent in that context? So,
When did you receive this letter?
Today.
Today, right?
4:14. 4:14 today, yes.
had you talked
Had the
to-
meeting at
Had
11:30.
you talked to him earlier?
We had a meeting at 11:30. yeah.
11:30, okay.
And so if we can make a recommendation that might say half of the things that you put forward, we want to make that recommendation. Maybe the other half, we say we don't want to make a recommendation. We may not all agree on which half we like. What's the process for building consensus around a set of recommendations? So are we preparing to take, say, a vote on each individual element? Or a package of elements? I'm trying to mentally think through, as people are, even just to help people who may want to make comments, is it helpful for them to speak to each individual one, or are we trying to prepare a package of recommendations as we think about what vote we're taking?
I think, at least from my perspective, it's not just one recommendation that covers everything that's been suggested. Let's look at it each one by one. So we're looking at the inclusionary housing in and of itself. We look at the height restriction in and of itself. Does that help?
It does help.
I can see the but.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about how the pieces work together as well, right? And so, I think that's what I've been thinking about since the meeting at City Hall, is how the individual elements even might work together. And so I'm just sort of thinking about the process it's just all good for discussion. I think that'll all be worthy of discussion once we've heard people, but.
Madam
Yes,
Chair?
please.
Along the lines of Ms. Bartley's commentary, and I agree with you, putting it out there, there were, in looking at Councilor Hausman's suggested amendments, for example, it sort of raises for me some of the things I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about historic properties or properties with some sort of historic background or something along Cabot Street, whether or not we have an inventory of those, whether or not how they would be impacted by a straightforward 45 feet everywhere and what that looks like. And I haven't gotten that to a conclusion on any of those things. But then it struck me as I was reading at 4:15, whenever you posted it to us, the amendment that maybe this is something in those areas that are in that pedestrian walkway, in those historic properties, that this might make some sense. So that then raised for me the same things you were thinking about. This is pretty complex, as we knew it would be going into it, and multidimensional, and I don't view it as something necessarily that's a yes or no, up or down, or a tweaking one particular suggested set of changes. So, but at the same time, we have the fact that the rush has started again, and now we have multiple projects that are coming before us to try to set the timeline in place to protect their right to go as high as they can possibly go. So anyway, I just raised those things as a framework for the discussion.
Darlene, could you, I think for anybody watching at home, and maybe for us just to sort of refresh our recollection, can you just briefly summarize the changes that the city has proposed? The city meaning the planning department?
Yes, yeah, city and together with the administration.
Right, right.
Let me just, I was just going to point out, before I do that, if you don't mind, I just wanted to show, for purposes of understanding, just so you are aware, the core pedestrian area in the CC2 runs from Elliott Street at the top all the way to Highland Ave, which you can't see my cursor. But it leaves a very, and it's only the parcels that abut Cabot Street. But it leaves us maybe 4.5 blocks that would not be impacted by that change at the lower end of Cabot Street. Let me just pull up the presentation. So I can, because I have a slide that summarizes. So essentially, I broke it down into three kind of larger categories. One, which I think is fairly straightforward, eliminate the tall building overlay district. Two, creating a new CC2 Cabot Street, a CC2 subdistrict that mirrors Cabot Street, the arm of the CC district, and reduces the maximum allowable height of buildings in that area to 45 feet. And then reducing the allowed height in the residential high density district, which is the zone between the CC district, between Cabot and Rantoul, from 55 feet to 40 feet. And then three, introducing greater affordability requirements for residential development projects, which our proposal was that the affordability would be limited to 12% of all housing units at 60% of area median income would be affordable, all new housing units at, and then the trigger was reduced from 6 units, a project with 6 new units to a project with 4 new units. I am deliberately using the word new to address a question that Ms. Masco had asked, but that is how we interpret the zoning, that it applies to new units created.
Okay. Now, I'm wondering if you're comfortable walking us through your understanding of what Councilor Hausman is proposing.
I mean, in fairness, I haven't had a lot of time to process it, and some of the suggestions, some of the things we talked about were not finalized in our meeting. But I think his proposal was, okay.
Well, let me ask you this then. He talks about, within the core pedestrian area of the CC2, a max building height of 35 feet with no more than 3 stories. I think you said this a few minutes ago, and I'm sorry. Can I ask you to show us again what the core pedestrian area of the CC2 subdistrict would be?
Yes, I'm going to do it slowly, so I think you can see my cursor, but, so the the orange, that is the CC2 subdistrict, and the brown. The 35 feet, sorry, I take it back. The right side is the CC2 subdistrict, in this case, the right side of the V. The 35 feet exists in the ordinance. I think that was unclear to some people already. Any parcel that abuts the R6 or the RMD is currently written is limited to 35 feet. So that is in place today. And we were,
Anything that abuts R6
RMD.
in RMD.
has max 35 feet.
So that's shown in brown on the map. That exists today. We were not proposing to change that. We were proposing to change the orange to 45 feet, which represents the remaining parcels in the CC2 district or the sub-district that represents the Cabot Street arm of the CC district to 45 feet. And Councillor Houseman's proposal relates to kind of refined it a little bit more, which was, or changed it a little bit. The core pedestrian area is those parcels within the CC Central Business District that front on either side of Cabot Street from Elliott Street to Highland. So it would only include parcels that have a frontage along Cabot Street. I have not called them out, but in some cases, so this area in behind between Cabot and Chapman, for the most part, there's not always a street there, would not necessarily change. That those parcels that front on Cabot Street would be reduced to 35 feet. I will be honest, that didn't make sense to me.
In what way?
Well, I would have seen it flip the other way, perhaps. Like if we're going to have a step back, it would step lower towards the neighborhood. And I think that there is not necessarily the existing character of Cabot Street is more in line with 45 feet than 35 feet, especially in the core pedestrian area in our historical buildings.
So if I understand, we have, and I just want to start, the Second Amendment says, within the CC2, so that's the new sub-district that would be created, for commercial and residential uses or mixed uses, 35 feet with no more than 3 stories. So anything within the CC2 would be 35 feet with no more than 3 stories. However, as the Third Amendment allows, for a special permit for a maximum building height of 45 feet with no more than 4 stories, where the additional height would result in additional affordable housing units.
What I understand he's portraying this in this one is a density bonus for the construction of affordable housing exclusively.
Say that again, please?
It's a density bonus, so you can add another story, but everything that you add has to be affordable housing.
To be fair, he says you're going to put together the formula, correct?
I know.
It doesn't say strictly affordable housing, it just says additional. And a formula that would make it so, and the way I interpreted that, and I know that you had the discussion, was that you would be, we'd be looking at a project that with a 4th story would have additional units in it, and then because of whatever the formula is, there would be additional affordable housing in that proposal. I viewed it more broadly. I didn't review it like that floor or whatever, or the building had to be strictly affordable housing.
I think that's what the formula part comes in. It wasn't fully formed, and how to calculate that. He was thinking, well, we give an extra story of height, but it has to be that extra story has to be affordable housing, but not literally, as in like not all the affordable units have to be on that 4th story, right? It was kind of a point that I brought up. We don't want that. But how do you calculate what the number of units is that in a building that varies, or building sizes that might vary across this? So it's something that we were going to look. We agreed to look and see if there were other models that do it similarly.
Yes, Ms. Flannery?
But this is all with a special permit.
Yes.
On top of it, yeah, this is all with a special permit to begin with.
And I actually like that aspect of it, so that we'd really be able to dig into the project and see and have a discussion.
Except as the planning director has reminded me, for all of these years we've been together, special permits should be generously granted, provided that the criteria is met. It's not like a zoning variance, which is a little bit more stricter requirements. So, Wayne,
Also, to the question of special permits, I think that's something we're sort of generally trying to get away from. I think the master plan reflects that too. So you like special permits, I guess, but
I don't, no, I
talking-
don't, oh.
I thought you were saying, Derek, that you like that aspect of it.
Well, I'm just saying that in the absence of, guidelines that everyone buys into, we'd be able to look at projects that come before us, and we'd have the leeway to apply a formula and, whatever, to give them the waiver for it after having seen the plans, knowing that there's fair distribution of the housing units, there's this, there's that, the other thing. As opposed to what we have right now, which are projects that I don't think we're all crazy about, that we have, and with the, what I would say, the height and other opportunities within the existing zoning laws that are bringing us, very tall, dense projects that we've seen on Rantoul Street and now migrating to Cabot Street. And so, without a change in the zoning, then I think that special permits or the ability to have those discussions gives us at least some give and take.
I agree with you. Somewhere between by right and special permit is the happy ground.
Yeah.
I certainly don't know where that is.
I don't either. I do think that with the Depot 2 project, for example, if we hadn't had the special permit request before us, I'm not quite sure that Casa de Luca and some of the other things that happened would have happened. We don't know because it actually turned into a discussion and back and forth because of the permit being there, as the special waiver, I should say, being there. So that's my view of it. And when you're dealing with, at that point, with much higher height opportunities for the developers, it's a different, maybe it's apples and oranges. But right now, if with the current zoning, we're left with people being unhappy with the projects that are coming forward.
Some people are unhappy.
It's all in moderation, that's right. Not for everyone.
Darlene, with that, on that third amendment, it talks about the suggested formula. Do you have a sense of what that formula might look like or could look like? Did you discuss it with the councilman?
No, as I mentioned, it was unformed.
Okay.
It's not something that I've had only learning about it today, time to dig into, nor, do I think it's fatal to the original proposal? This is incremental, and there are additional things that can be revisited and looked at as we go forward, but there is a time sensitivity to the action, and you have to, you have 21 days to respond to city council with a recommendation, or they can act. So I also think that's, that's important to keep in mind. It sounds like this proposal is going to be floated with city council regardless of your recommendations. So it's worth, evaluating them. But I haven't signed off on these necessarily.
No, that's fine. I just thought, this came to us late this afternoon. I thought it made sense for us to go over it, to get an understanding. It's hard to vote, to recommend or not recommend or whatever, without really understanding what's being proposed. I mean, when I look at this First Amendment in conjunction with the second and the third, basically, isn't what's being proposed simply that the CC2 is 35 feet with no more than 3 stories unless a special permit's granted? I don't understand.
But this is not your proposal that you're
No,
reviewing.
no, I know it.
mean,
I'm
the-
just trying to understand, just trying to get a
Yeah.
fundamental understanding of what's being proposed here.
Yeah, I mean, the counselor is proposing 35 feet instead of 45 feet, 3 stories instead of 4 stories,
Right.
as a amendment to what the planning department submitted as a zoning amendment.
Which is
Right.
what we heard at the public hearing.
Right.
Right.
So am I correct in saying, when you were talking about, with regards to the proposed 40 feet for the RHD district, and your concern about the 5-foot difference, I guess, the step up from 35 on Cabot Street to 40 feet in the non-Cabot Street abutting properties, and, to 45 feet once you passed, okay, let me back up again, confusing. From the pedestrian walkway area, it would be a 35-foot limit on the height limit on the properties that are abutting Cabot Street. And then when you step back to the properties that are not abutting Cabot Street, but are in CC2 and not yet in RHD, according to your proposal, they would be at 45 feet. Right?
Correct.
And then, according to your proposal, when we get to the RHD district, it would come down to 40 feet.
Correct.
Okay, so there'd be a 5-foot difference from the 35 feet on Cabot Street. You go up once you're past,
The 35 feet is not in my proposal.
no, I understand
Yes,
that.
I just want to be clear. Yeah.
I understand that. But you were talking about the height difference, and to me, the 5 feet doesn't mean quite as much if it is something that's keeping Cabot Street sort of looking a bit smaller and, more along the lines of what it is right now, but not losing, anyway, as opposed to 45 feet. It's 10 feet difference. I think it's,
Yeah, I was
Scale is much
speaking less
different.
specifically in that, in your kind of, in a conceptual view, you think of a step down into the neighborhoods. I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking, not specifically to this proposal, but missing the part that he was proposing a change to 35 feet regardless to the whole CC2 district, as Second Amendment, as Chairman Hutchinson pointed out,
Yep.
so.
Did you have a question, Ms. Flannery?
Well, my question
Good.
is, but if, with what you just said, Mr. Beckwith, if in fact the person's proposal was. Oh,
Thank you.
thank you, Karen, I'm sorry. With what you just spoke to, if the applicant wished a 40-foot building, they could still request through a special permit. So everything you're stating relative to the 35 feet is subject to the special permit to create 40.
No.
Am I, no?
I mean, that's a whole nother amendment, right? The 45
yep.
feet. There's no special permit on the table for 40 feet.
Okay. For a maximum
Derek was
building
talking
height of
about
45 feet.
RHD.
You're talking about the
The
RHD.
RHD.
Okay.
Yeah. But each of these are, individual elements and, I don't want you to get lost in this.
No,
This
no, I
This
don't-
should be considered a comment letter that you were considering, and it's not the proposal. I just want, and it's important that you discuss it and think about all the different options. I think it should be considered, but I don't want you to get lost in the details of this single proposal that is not part of what you're voting on.
No, and I agree wholeheartedly with you, but I think it only makes sense to make sure that the city council is asking us for some specific things here, one of which is to consider keeping the public hearing open. But I agree with you, but I think it's just important to understand what he is proposing. But I do want to make sure that we refocus in on what the city has proposed, which again is that elimination of the tall building overlay district, the creation of the CC2 Cabot Street district, the reduction of maximum height in the CC2 to 45 feet, and the reduction in the RHD from 55 to 40, and then the inclusionary housing.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Of course.
Rodney is, I don't know what point Rodney joined, but Rodney is on the call.
Well, we welcome Rodney Sinclair.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Are we, it's not an up or down vote, though, on the proposal that Ms. Nguyen has put forward, right? Is it up or down, or are we able to recommend changes and variances from that?
You're making a recommendation, and your recommendation can be nuanced, I guess, to the extent that you feel it needs to be.
It just can't be more stringent.
No, I don't see it as a binary choice. It's not an up and down or binary choice because we can amend it or make other recommendations. And for that reason, I think that's why we're considering this letter from Councilor Hausman, because this is some ideas about how we might change or make recommendations. These are just some ideas. There's others.
No, I agree. I agree.
But I
just-
think we're clear that it's not a binary choice, and that this is not one of another choice that we could shoehorn in there. These are just some ideas presented. Thank you, Councilor Hausman.
But it's also raised the point that if we were to consider items that were more stringent as recommendations to the city council, than
Yes.
the proposal that we have before us for vote, then, how much can we amend it? If we can't amend it down, we could only amend it up. So is it a binary choice or not?
Darlene, can I ask you this procedural question? Let's assume for the sake of argument that we walk away tonight having made a recommendation on your proposal to the city council. And the city council then considers what Councilor Hausman has done. How does our recommendation relate to what Councilor Hausman might suggest? I mean, does it make our recommendation moot because he's going to offer different amendments?
I think he's one person on council, so your recommendation carries the weight of your board, regardless of what it says. So, I mean, I think, they might have, there might be things that there might be findings or decision points you want to put in your recommendation. If the council decides to vote and act on the amendment, that is the point where they would then it would then renotice or send it
Okay.
back. It's not your action that would do that. You're just sending you're sending the recommendation.
Okay.
But the council would need to vote similar to other ordinance amendments that have, or proposed ordinance amendments that have been submitted. The council would need to vote as a body to submit an amendment or to submit a new ordinance.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to be heard on this? Come on up, one at a time, please. Have a seat. Give us your name and address, if you would, please.
I didn't want to go first. But I will. Do you want to go?
Someone always has to be first.
I know, you're right. I'll take it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Chris Copeland, 15 Rantoul Street. I work with Beverly Crossing. We've done some developments in town. I thank everyone here for their service and dedication to the city. I really enjoy working with this group. I applaud these efforts to refine zoning from time to time to reflect current needs and views of a city and its residents, property owners, and businesses that depend on such rules to sustain and thrive. These are important issues facing Beverly and its future. As a company, I think we're in a unique position because we've navigated the Beverly housing market. We kind of know how projects work, how they get financed, how they come together, how they work and don't work as we move through time. In terms of the specific zoning amendments that are on the table today, I agree 55 feet has no place in the core area between Rantoul and Cabot. I think that's probably smart planning. Taller building forms along Cabot and Rantoul, I think, should be more prominent. That seems like a good thing. I think 45 feet or so, 4 stories, give or take, on Cabot Street is the right language. We've looked at a number of sites on Cabot Street, and I don't think, frankly, based on parking restrictions, density, size of sites, acreage, there's not a lot left. So even if you said there was 5 stories and 75 feet or something on Cabot, there's nothing to really develop that we see of substance based on, sheer lot sizes or historic buildings. In other words, it seems pretty well preserved the way it is from our perspective and the way we look at things. But I do think 45 feet or 4 stories is the right math going forward. I believe off-site affordable housing can and does work. It's a tool that can create housing in a creative way. But I understand why the city is choosing to do away with that. That seems okay. Most of what I'm here for tonight are the headwinds that we face as developers to create housing. We've created over 100 units of permanent affordable housing at both 80 and 60% AMI levels. I think the city remains at 11.8% in SHI inventory. No one wants to go backwards and create a 40B susceptible environment, so we understand that. I think the city depends on housing creation. I think the city depends on incremental tax revenue from the creation of housing, whether it's mixed use or some other way. And I think they depend on that incremental revenue long term. So any disruption of that will be felt years away. So that's what worries me about making zoning changes that may be a little more simple in nature, like, I'll just change the affordable housing. The effect might not be till 5 or 10 years. And some of those things that, as a city, which I'm not a politician or running the city, but I think I'd be worried about stuff like that. I do think housing creates economic driving of the businesses that depend on it to thrive. We have retailers on Rantoul Street that depend on those people to come down and patronize those businesses. And over time, I think more rooftops can help. So I wonder in some of these proposals why parking may not be discussed. If you're talking about density bonuses and height and things like that, why wouldn't, I think parking might want to go with that. As a developer, creating parking is extremely expensive. It seems odd to me that a lot of the zoning is 1 per bedroom, but it's 1 per unit just around like the train station. I think it works as a formula more broadly downtown between Cabot and Rantoul. So to me, I think a formula that talks about parking and getting fewer cars on the road is a good thing to consider. We've done some math. I don't want to get into a whole lot of technical terms and acronyms and things, but just some broad math. If we take a 50-unit project, just a generic project, in the math that we see, in the current environment, if we created 8% at 60% AMI, we'd have a baseline rent that we would be trying to achieve under the current zoning. And just for some math, if that same project had 2 more units of affordable. In other words, if we went to the 12 at 60 for the same 50-unit project, the remaining 44 units would see a rent increase of about $82. Math to math, return to return, without talking about any other changes in the capital structure or the capital cost of the project.
Excuse me, 82 per month or 82 per year?
82 per month per unit for the 44 market rate units. I think developers need to create affordable housing in what they do, in the production of housing. I think that's okay. But when the ratio increases, it becomes a tax burden on the market rates. And I think there's kind of this silent effect that if it happens in one building, if I have to go up in rent in one building, or if it naturally goes up because of the market conditions, that's not just that one building either. It goes to all the other buildings. So one example is like when Homes was built. I think she had more luxurious units higher up. She had a really nice building. Her rents kind of began to drive the market on Rantoul Street. Our rents were always lower, and I think they still are today. Same with Sedna. Now they have rents that are high. Low, and it just kind of trickles down across the market. And I'm not an economist, but there's definitely a broad effect when you have the burden of market rates in one area that goes beyond one project. And this is, again, I'm not an economist. This is a region-wide, nationwide problem. But I do believe the production of housing, with some degree of affordable housing, is important. One other last point I just wanted to make. When there's a by right inclusionary housing ordinance, and let's just say it's today 8 at 60 or 10% at the mix or 12 at 80, and we comply with that on site on our project, there's no way, unless we go beyond that, unless we go more affordable, there's no way to get state subsidies. There's no way to get help. We just do it, and again, the market rates, I think, subsidize that. So I wonder if this board could consider ways to create more affordable housing through state incentive, through other means that would serve to not disincentivize development, but incentivize the production of more inclusionary units. Because my fear is that if you just say, let's go from 8 to 12 or 8 to 14, as Counselor said, that you might disincentivize projects on the margin or projects that may or may not go. They might just not go or not happen unless we can get some kind of state money or state subsidy or some other way. So just by saying go from 8 to 12, that becomes the minimum, and we have no way to get us any kind of help for that. So just something else to consider when you talk about just raising the whole bar. So
Can I ask, for those who are renting, for those who are at 60% AMI, are the tenants receiving any state subsidies?
some are on Section 8.
Okay.
Yep. And I
So
think
that
that's the only subsidy.
provides you the assurity or the certainty of that rental rate, right? Because it's a government. I mean, my understanding is that affordable housing has become more popular with investors over the last 5 to 7 years because of the fact that there's a certainty of the income stream, that the rent is going to get paid partially, yes, by the tenant, but to a larger proportion by the government.
Our company doesn't look at it that way. Some tenants have raft assistance that we've seen as well, but so there are subsidy programs out there that tenants use, but we don't look at it as a 60% is going to get a voucher, so it's guaranteed. We don't look at it that way at all. We qualify all of our residents, no matter what income level they're at, to make sure they can afford it.
Okay, thank you. Wayne?
Can you address the idea that we would raise the current, or lower the current threshold from 6 units to 4?
We don't build at that level, but I think I heard a soundbite in Cambridge that when you do that, you just build the size. So you build the size project to not do the affordables. I think some developers would do that because the burden of the affordability to create it at 400,000 or 500,000 per unit just to build it and get a 60% rent doesn't pencil. So you just you do a different project to
So
not
they
do the
built
affordable.
3 big ones rather than 4.
I guess, yeah. Again, I don't know the smaller project world, but that's something I'd be thinking of.
Yeah.
And may not be possible in every scenario either. It may not be possible to just, miss the threshold. I don't know.
What's keeping me up nights is the unintended consequences of some of these things that we just
Yeah.
need to try to foresee. It's difficult to do that.
I agree.
Appreciate your insight.
I agree. It is hard. It's a challenging issue for sure.
Derek?
I want to thank you, Mr. Copeland, for providing information. The transparency really is helpful to me, for one anyway. So I wanted to come back to your hypothetical 50-unit, with $82 increase per month in market rate. So I guess my question, and I did some numbers, was that for 8 units? Was that for?
That's if we went from 8 at 60 to 12 at 60. So it's 2 more units at 60.
So 2 more units.
Yeah. The other,
From 4 to 6 in your 50-unit building.
Right.
Right.
From 4 to 6.
Or would be 8%.
right.
Okay,
the
I was trying to
44
I was just trying to do some quick math to figure out what that shortfall you needed to be able to meet
Yeah.
your numbers
Yeah.
and pay for the project and,
Or for
that
each
sort of
project to be on an even keel.
to
I
be
guess
on
is
an
the way to
even
say it, yeah.
keel or something like that. I was trying to
Yeah.
come up with a number and I had,
I guess you're amortizing that delta, right?
yeah, I'm not amortizing anything right now. I'm writing it out in my little pen.
That's
here,
was your
okay?
thought, right?
So I'm just trying to have a little snapshot that we're here. And so the number is at your $82 increase per month for market rate for each one of the units. Do you have an annual cost of
For
what
44 units, yeah.
For 44 units?
Yeah. The 44 remaining units pay about $80 more a
About
month.
80.
That's just to be on an even footing with the 8 at 60. Current zoning.
Okay. And so that's the shortfall, quote unquote, from the affordable housing, from the
For the additional 2 units.
additional 2 units?
Yeah. To achieve the same untrended return on cost is how we look at it. Yeah. That's what
That's
that,
assuming a shortfall of 1,800 per unit then. Seems high.
Yeah, it does seem high.
a shortfall of
You had,
18.
if you have 40, we can go in math all night, 44 times 82 is $3,600, and that's for 2 additional units.
That the other 44 have to split.
Right, but you're splitting, they're splitting $3,600.
Yes.
Divided by 2, which is $1,800 per each of those
For the additional,
units,
for the other two 60s. Yeah.
Which is-
Yeah,
Too high.
I guess that's right.
Yeah, it's $1,800, and you're assuming a rent of, in your calculation of, I don't know, 3,000? Mm-hmm. You're not discounting it by 60%.
That's not how the 60% rates are set by HUD though, right? So,
Right.
it's, as we know, that's the area median income, and that's, I forget what it was, they just set it for.
But I see what you're
23,
doing. You're
right?
taking the 44 units and just amortizing it back to the 2 that are created,
Yeah,
right, that are additionally created.
yeah.
And is
which-
the increment
That indicates a
each one?
shortfall of 1,800 per unit,
Yeah,
which you're agreeing with.
I think that's right. I have to double check. Yeah, I think that's right.
So no one loves getting into the weeds more than me, seriously. But
I might.
we are, we're a little bit up against the clock, so I'm just going to see if we can, no, never apologize. Just try to move it along a bit. Been very helpful.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did somebody else know?
Yep.
Hi. Now for something completely different.
Name and address, please, for the record.
Susie Lamont. I live on 20 Porter Street, and I sit on the Historic District Commission, but my remarks are my own tonight. And mostly about historic as it relates to these zoning changes. To me, I'm hearing the point is that the community is valuing the historic character of the Cabot Street neighborhood downtown, and I think we need more than just a height to protect that. I think height is one factor, but I don't think it alone is going to be enough to achieve what, in my opinion, the community's goals are about caring for that Cabot neighborhood flavor. In our ordinances, there is very little language that talks about historic buildings and places. Chapter 300 barely even mentions the word historic. So it defines our districts, RMD, R6, R10, RMD, doesn't even mention anything about what a historic building is, why we should keep it. But as a mostly built area as our downtown, I think that we need to look more of the, excuse me, conversions of existing buildings rather than thinking of it in a new construction way. Most of the lots are built with something, and I think we should be encouraging and incentivizing retention of existing buildings through something like an adaptive reuse ordinance, which would be an easier way to retain our characteristics that we value in the neighborhood and tap into embedded energy and carbon savings through material reuse. I think thoughts like that haven't even been touched on. Height alone is not going to do it. There are things that could be put in place, like a demolition by neglect ordinance, adaptive reuse ordinance. Currently, there's an incomplete draft of a cultural heritage property ordinance that would incentivize saving historic features by either a bonus unit or some sort of incentive. The Historic Districts Commission has been talking about neighborhood conservation districts, and it's a way to allow neighborhoods to create their own values for what they see, what they appreciate about their neighborhoods, and then they govern it themselves. That's a protection that could help protect these characters that we're looking for. Again, it's in progress. Two specific comments I have beyond that are, if I were making a change to zoning in the RHD district, I might think about changing the setback to not say 15 feet, because that's already inconsistent with downtown. Most of the houses, most of the residences on those properties are much closer than 15 feet. And so I just think if you're going to touch that ordinance, you might as well change that requirement that it be 15 feet setback. And the other thing I'll mention is aggregation of parcels, not to forget that there is a possibility of aggregating a bunch of different properties to take them all down and build something big is a reality. To say that there aren't enough parcels right now that are big enough may be true, but that doesn't mean you can't create big parcels. And that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Did you have questions?
Yeah, actually.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just trying to, I'm not an expert on Cabot Street and on all the properties on Cabot Street.
Nor am I.
And, is driving up and down and, looking just, raises more questions for me anyway. But, I mean, there are still some small buildings on Cabot Street that could be taken down and then, a 45-foot building being put up in its place. And I'm wondering if any of them are historic properties, if there's, I know that for historic properties, I think we can protect it for a year. And that's it, that we have. Do you have any sense of what that inventory is, or is the city, and this could go to Darlene too, planning on an inventory, to look at historic properties that should be protected?
Some of the area on Cabot Street is inventoried and some is not. The Historic Districts Commission tried to initiate an inventory for an extension, which basically runs from roughly where St. Mary's Church is to where the Indo Pub is now, to inventory those properties. That got triggered when the Cabot Cinema was for sale. We went, oh my goodness, that whole swath is very vulnerable. And we didn't get support from the mayor's office to do that work, but certainly the Cabot is vulnerable. Those buildings where Organic Garden is, those kind of small, lower building, one-story buildings, those are vulnerable. The building where, I think it's called the Star Building, the hair salon, let's see, the hair salon, what's the name of it? Oh, geez, coffee shops change names so often. Kathmandu, that block, very low buildings, that's all vulnerable. What is the record shop now and the old Atomic Cafe is a house that was built in 17-something. It was a revolutionary house. Those are all vulnerable. It looks like a storefront now, but if you step back, you see the gabled roof. That's all in that area that's not been examined closely. We were hoping to take that to make a National Register nomination so that those property owners could get money, tap into money to repair those properties, but that is kind of on hold.
In the, and I don't know if you have an opportunity to.
Microphone, Derek.
Sorry, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at the, some of the amendments or proposals that came in from Councilor Houseman, but protecting or having a 35-foot limit on the properties that are contingent to Cabot Street itself. Sounds like it might impact on some of those properties that you're talking about, that you mentioned
Yes,
specifically.
the core pedestrian zone, part of the area I just described that has not been examined well for inventory is the core pedestrian zone on the Elliott Street side, the northern side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Miranda Simasco from 10 Hopkins Avenue. I just wanted to very quickly reiterate comments at the last public hearing, urging the board to really carefully think through the reduction in the floor from 6 units to 4 units for the affordable. And for the reasons I think that members have talked about tonight, it just is a real disincentive for developers who are working with small projects. And it is an analysis that's really unique to the smaller projects, not to the Beverly Crossing projects, as Chris said, but to the small ones, where there are folks who are really trying, and thinking about meeting the urgent need for sort of the naturally occurring affordable housing, smaller projects downtown that are consistent with the existing fabric and the look and feel of the community. And those become very difficult. And along those same lines, to follow up on something that Darlene mentioned, I do think that ordinance, the way it is currently written and would be amended, is vague as to whether the formula is based on newly created units or whether you also take into account the existing units. And an example is a client who purchased a 4-family building, had an idea to put 4+ units in the back. There's enough parking, it's all great. But depending on how you do that math, he's either, if he did 4 units, he would be fine if you're counting just the new units. But if you count the 4 that already exist, he's knocked out, and suddenly he's doing, he's basically having to provide double the amount of inclusionary housing when he's only creating 4 new units. Because he would be counted for the 4 that already exist. So I just think that's something that I think I heard Darlene say that it's not intended to operate that way, but the clarity in the ordinance would be appreciated. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else from home who would like to comment? Okay. Hearing none, I think the first question for this board is, are we ready to close the public hearing? Or restated, is there any reason to keep the public hearing open?
I'm unclear, so we have this 21-day decision deadline anyway, right? So it doesn't seem like we have much choice, right? Okay.
Well, Madam Chair, if we were to keep it open, we would need to close it within 21 days of last Monday's meeting. So we'd have to close it within 2 weeks. Basically, would that be January 2nd?
After Christmas is
21 days after December 5th would be.
After December 5th, okay, the 26th, yeah, the day after Christmas. So we'd need to meet and vote by that date. Pardon me?
You have 21 days to furnish a recommendation, not to close the public hearing.
But one of the requests that did get read into the record was consideration of whether or not to keep the meeting open.
Yes.
But I'm sorry, go ahead, Wayne.
Do we have any indication that there are other people who would like to be heard? Here, we don't have any further letters, there's no further comment,
I agree.
so therefore, I don't see any reason to keep the meeting, the hearing open any further,
And I was just
other
gonna,
than a last call.
We did a last call, right?
what I heard also is if the city council goes back and makes substantive changes, it comes back. If they do things along the lines of the letter from Councilor Houseman that may require a reposting, we might be doing this all again.
If it requires a reposting,
Yeah.
they would seek another recommendation. Susie Lamont has a question.
I know someone who wanted to attend tonight but had a conflict with financial forecasting committee. So I don't know if that bears any.
I mean, like Counselor Houseman, anyone can submit a letter.
Right.
So I think that would be.
Right.
The
I'm not sure that holding it open for someone who,
No, I know, I just wanted, you were asking if there were people who had more comments, and I do know of one person who has some comments, who was unable to attend.
Attorney Samasco?
I'm sorry, I think, I have a question. Procedurally, it's not clear to me reading the statute that the planning board has to make its decision within 21 days of the first public hearing. You have the option to continue your public hearing, and your decision or recommendation has to be made, I believe, within 21 days following the closing of your public hearing. I think, Darlene,
I was going on what Counselor Williams, Solicitor Williams said at the meeting last Monday, was that we had 21 days.
City council
just-
closed theirs. I wonder if that has any bearing.
Yeah,
it's as somebody, as a former city councilor who was on the council when at least 2 major zoning changes were passed, and saw successive meetings of subcommittees and planning board meetings. People will remember Councilor Houseman and Mr. Thompson working for a long period of time and presenting at multiple public hearings. It's just, I think that the procedure deserves some clarity. Because I think
Let me read.
people are rushing to make a decision. And that's obviously everybody's prerogative, but it seems to me that the procedure may allow you the flexibility to continue the public hearing. That's all.
Thank
I
you.
sure would like to know that.
No,
Madam Chair?
yes.
Hypothetically, and only hypothetically, if we were to keep this meeting open and the city council was to meet next week and was to discuss Councilor Houseman's proposal and then wanted a reaction from us, would that trigger a new meeting? Or if we kept this meeting open, would we then be tasked with recommendations for them as well on that?
Yeah, what?
Yeah,
Whether or
that's a
not,
lot. Yeah.
whether or not we'd be able to make recommendations that are more, what's the term?
Stringent?
Stringent than are in the current proposal before us.
I'm not sure keeping the public hearing open in anticipation of what the city council might or might not do should drive our decision.
Well, and also the city council is not acting in a public hearing because theirs is closed, so it
Right.
seems a little,
I mean, I'm struck by the fact that the city council didn't hesitate to close the public hearing.
can I read the language?
Please, we love language.
Sorry, didn't interrupt, but I have that language. No vote to adopt any such proposed ordinance or bylaw or amendment shall be taken until a report with recommendations by a planning board has been submitted to the city council or 21 days after said hearing has elapsed without submission of such report, which would indicate to me that they could act within 21 days if they chose to. Without the planning
Who's
board.
hearing?
Hearing is said.
Whose hearing they're talking
Right,
about?
I know, I need to
Their
now
hearing
go, because
or
none of
our
this is
hearing?
clear, right?
I think that means their hearing.
After such notice, hearing, and report, or after 21 days shall have elapsed after such hearing without submission of such report, a city council or town meeting may adopt, reject, or amend and adopt any such proposed ordinance or bylaw. If a city council fails to vote within 90 days after the city council hearing, or if a town meeting, I will skip that part. Within 90 days after the city council hearing, no action shall be taken thereon until after a subsequent public hearing is held.
So they have to wait 21 days to hear from us. If they don't hear from us, then they have the option of taking action. If they don't take any action, then they have to act within 90 days.
Yes.
So,
So if we are going to act, and I think it's our responsibility to act, it has to be within 21 days of the close of their public hearing, which was December 5th. So we have to,
Or could they choose to wait for us because it's an or?
they certainly
Is it the
could
earlier-
choose.
Is it the earlier of 21 days?
Shall be taken
would think
until
they'd
a
want-
report
they
with
should want to hear
recommendations has
from
been
us.
Do
submitted,
not have to act in 21 days. They have
or
to act in
21
90
days after said hearing has elapsed without submission of such report. I mean, it doesn't,
The council does not have to act within 21 days. They have to act within 90 days.
they are allowed to act
They are
within
allowed to act
21
within 21
days.
days. Whether or not
If they
they,
get a recommendation from us.
if they don't want to wait for a recommendation, which we are not ready to give them, then that's up to the council. They don't have to wait.
That's right.
Is our
Wow.
recommendation potentially as open-ended as we would like another joint discussion, or we would like, how open-ended is the recommendation we're making? Like, could we make a recommendation to say there might be aspects that we would like further discussed? I guess I'm sort of asking, can we say our recommendation is that you not act next meeting because we would like another crack at it? Like, I'm just sort of, how open-ended are we on what we can recommend?
I guess my question is, do we want another crack at it, and why? I mean, we've had now two nights of a public hearing.
No, don't close it yet.
What's that?
Don't close it yet. Mr. DeFranza just showed up, but, no, just kidding.
To that point, sorry, go ahead, Madam Chair.
No, go ahead, George.
No, we had discussed, there are at least 3 major points here.
Yep.
So is your thought that we would close it and vote on each of those now? I guess what I'm hearing from other people on the board is that we might want to discuss the finer points of some of those at length, and noting that we have an hour and 18 minutes until we're supposed to be out of here tonight.
I know, with a ton of other stuff to do.
I also want to make sure everyone's clear that closing the public hearing doesn't mean you can't talk about it anymore.
Of course not, yeah.
Again, I'm not sure what keeping the public hearing open does for us.
Madam Chair?
Yep.
I think it might give the person who just came in an opportunity to give us some thoughts on affordable housing and the proposed changes, and to answer some questions that I know I have about changes to the formula, and that would be helpful to me.
Well, we haven't closed it, so he's obviously
Okay, yeah.
welcome. No. Darlene, just procedurally, I'm starting to get concerned about an hour and 15 minutes for everything else we have to do. What are our options? To be out of here by 10?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you still have a lot that you're trying to parse through.
Yep.
You could, I think there's, a whole, you could close the public hearing, you could request more time. You could request a meeting more time from the city council, which would be at their leisure, whether or not they want to extend that.
So we could ask the city council for an extension on the time period by which to give them a recommendation?
Yes.
And they-
I'm pulling that out, but I think it seems reasonable.
Well, we wouldn't really be asking them for an extension. We'd be asking them to defer their vote until we did give the one. We don't need an extension. They don't have to act. So all we're saying is, we don't have a recommendation for you yet. We'd appreciate it if you'd wait. And again, it's up to them if they do that. Our recommendation is, wait for us to come with a recommendation. But I don't think it requires an extension.
Okay, so setting aside the time frame, the time concerns, I guess my next question is, what additional information do we want to see or hear, other than Mr. DeFranza, before we can make a recommendation?
Well, I would like to, Council Hausman has been in this business for a long time. I would like to seriously consider what it is he's recommending. I'd like to walk the street and take a look at it with his recommendation in mind and with the original recommendation in mind. We got this at 4:00. I haven't really had a chance
That's
to
no
look at it.
new additional information that you're talking about in regards to a public hearing, right? In terms of accepting new information, or?
Well, accepting new information and having the information necessary to make a recommendation of one sort or the other.
Just my own, I don't feel the need to keep the hearing open. I do feel the need for more time for myself to consider the unintended consequences and the ramifications of this decision.
Madam Chair, may I please?
I'm not ready to make a decision on this.
Yes, Rodney, please.
Thank you, appreciate it. First of all, my apologies for having to come in late. One of the things that I'm challenged with, and maybe there's conversations that I missed, have been really getting to I think the beginning element of this, which is what are the goals? What is truly trying to be achieved here? This seems like a strategy. It seems like there's the goals part missing, or even a conversation around various strategies within trying to achieve a particular goal. And then the most important part, which most of the people talking through the public hearing have alluded to, are the consequences. What are the consequences of these decisions? Everybody has a perspective. I'm not sure where to go with any of it. I do not want Rodney Sinclair to be the judge of any of this because, I would like the experts to talk to me about these impacts of these decisions. I think we're truly missing that part. It seems pretty evident. So I guess the question I have is how are we having a conversation about ending a public hearing or making a recommendation when there's so much missing? And aside from that, the past two hearings I've been a part of, this one and the one with the city councilors, there may have been a total of 10 or 15 people speaking. How do we make such a large decision for our community with 10 voices? So where are the rest of the voices? Looking back on the master plan for this city, 200 plus hours of this, 600 people surveyed, all of this outreach. And in this instance, it seems like we're really missing the voices. So those are just some things that I'm just challenged with in this conversation. And I'm looking for something. Am I missing something? Did we just jump into, hey, we want to limit growth on Cabot Street and here's how we're going to do it. I feel like I'm missing something. So that's kind of where I am.
No, I think I would offer this, that with respect to the public, the best we can do is to invite them to be a part of this discussion. And I think we do that. I don't know how to otherwise reach and ask people to come. If you're on the Beverly Community Facebook page or anything like that, you know that there's a wide variety of opinions. And I think that people have encouraged them to be in touch with City Council, to attend these types of meetings, but we can't force anybody to be here. And we try to make it easy through BevCam and through these types of remote meetings. But we can't force people to be here. We appreciate those who take the time to come and offer their opinions and wish more of our citizens would be here on such important issues. But they're not. And I think that we can't let that stop us from doing our work. We've listened to those who have come, who have offered their opinions, and our job is to absorb that and to make best judgments.
But how do we make best judgments just from hearing a soundbite from one developer or from one historic commission member? I mean, can we go above and beyond in this? Is it important enough to go above and beyond? Do we hold a separate meeting with the historic commission? Do we hold a separate meeting with developers? Do we talk to people in the communities that some of the councilors have identified for further growth? What if they say they don't want growth in those communities? How does that affect this decision? We had I'm looking through the master plan and it talks about, Cabot Street being a priority growth area. How does this differ from what was identified in the master plan? So there's a lot that's going on here that I think requires us to go above and beyond to figure out. And if that means that we hold separate conversations and we identify times to hear about the impacts a little bit deeper, shouldn't we do that?
Again, I would argue that we provide that opportunity. We do that. Chris Copeland has chosen to be here tonight because he thinks it's important to be here tonight. There's other developers who have chosen not to be here tonight, and we have to respect their decision-making and their decision not to be here tonight. I think that this comes about because, and this is just my opinion, that the administration has heard the concerns of some of our citizens about the need to protect various neighborhoods within Beverly, one of them being the Cabot Street neighborhood, and the proposed zoning amendments, and I'm not talking about
Madam
right
Chair,
now.
where are those community members who have been up in arms? So I don't even see them. I just, again, that goes to now, what's the goal? What's like, why? Why are we doing this? And I'm not clear as to why. You know, Darlene did speak to hearing members of the community say that they wanted this, but I haven't really heard many people come in these past two meetings to say that. So I don't feel that push. So I'm just, there's a disconnect here, and I don't understand where, there's a disconnect. I'm not understanding where it's coming from, what the true goal is, why this strategy versus other strategies. There's a member of the community who spoke to maybe doing adaptive reuse strategies. That's not on the table. Why not that strategy versus another strategy? What are the impacts of these strategies? You know, Copeland talked about the potential impacts down the line, 5-10 years. Have those been identified? Have those been looked at? If they have, we should have that information. We should talk about that.
I don't think
there's
we
a lot
have
of
the,
thought here.
we don't have the ability to do I think the level of analysis that you're asking us for. I think you're asking for a really deep, in the weeds, what's going to be the financial consequences from this type of a zoning change. And I don't think the resources are there to do it. I think that this is
And we
from,
probably shouldn't have the conversation then.
Well, I mean,
We can't do a deep analysis. We can't this can't be well, let's just, hey, there's a recommendation, let's just try it out.
no, well, respectfully, Rodney, it's Andrea. There are some of us in this room who served on the master plan steering committee, and that was years of listening, of engaging, of coming to public meetings, generally public meetings in the neighborhoods. And that informed the master plan, which in turn, if I am correctly going with the through line, that informed this. So that's been going on for the past few years. And respectfully to people, I mean, it's unfair of me to bring up the person who couldn't come because of the financial forecasting meeting. But as between the financial forecasting meeting and this meeting, the financial forecasting meeting won out. So I'm sympathetic to some extent, but I'm also not necessarily willing to hamstring what we can do in the hopes that we might get an answer if we just keep trying. And so for me, I sat on the master plan committee. We spent a ton of time trying to figure these things out. And this was the result of that. So I look at it as we've done that work. If other folks haven't been engaged during that time, I'm not sure what else we can do about that. I mean, I do hear what you're saying, but I also was present at all of those and part of all of those, and I know a lot of work went into it.
So to that point, the master plan speaks to Cabot Street being a priority growth area. This seems to some degree, minimize that. So there seems to be a little bit, and maybe I'm mistaken. So
Yeah, I think, Rodney, this is Darlene.
Again, that's just one conversation. Master plan. How does the master plan fit into this new zoning change? Is there a conflict? Is it the same?
There are at
And again,
times,
we don't have to go into it right now. I guess I'm just pointing out that there's a lot that is unknown.
yeah, Rodney,
and-
there are a lot of competing interests at times that we're balancing, and there are a number of strategies in the master plan, and you're picking out kind of one overarching strategy about growth areas overall. But We also have a specific strategy that says revise the CC district to create multiple distinct districts responsive to scale and land use character of the district and adjacent districts. And that is the goal that this change is responding to. And during those discussions with the master plan, we talked about reducing the height on Cabot Street and eliminating the tall building overlay district as two specific actions that we would take following along the master plan. And so that is the grounds for those specific changes.
Wayne?
Just comment that in the similar way that we trust the engineering department to make recommendations to us, we trust parking and traffic to make recommendations to us, we have to have some trust in our planning department to make good recommendations, which they have done. Further, I would second that the master plan was a very well thought out document, took a long time in consideration, and that the master plan certainly is informing my decision as to this question. Similarly, and perhaps more importantly in my case, the climate action plan also is informing my decision on this and everything that we decide. We have those things in place. This is not a one-off decision. It's based on a lot of input and very careful consideration over years and maybe decades. So I would not characterize this as a decision that's being taken at all lightly, period.
Madam Chair.
Yep, go ahead, Derek.
So I think that one of the things that we're sitting here in December, right before the holidays, addressing this is because over the summer, we saw a series of projects come before us that suddenly raised public concern, and the concern of some councilors, for example, that there were these big projects coming down the pike and what's happening, we're growing out of control, that sort of thing. Coupled with the fact that they were by right projects that were bringing it right to the very edge of what's possible and the maximum number of units, and then they started to impinge on downtown Cabot Street and the Gateway project, and it's suddenly there was concern, what's happening here? We have to act. Then Councilor St. Hilaire did his moratorium basically at 35 feet and freezing everything, and the city council hasn't acted on that, but the administration is to be applauded for acting and putting something forward for us to look at. And now the question is whether or not that's part of, or those proposals would be good. One of the driving factors for me is the fact that, we do have projects starting to percolate and come forward, not percolate, come forward, that weren't imagined for Cabot Street, that we don't actually know the scale of the projects yet, but we do know that there's action being taken. We have two of them before us tonight on taking land where there isn't much there, and that is going to, regardless of what we vote on tonight, because they filed it, is going to bring us more potentially by right projects within some number of years, short or long term. So I think we're between a rock and a hard place and needing to act and do something because we do have issues about whether or not Cabot Street, for example, and that's what primarily this is about, is going to be impacted. And whether or not it become something that is 45-foot buildings, pretty much, and we're talking, takes years for this stuff to happen. Years and years, but whether or not suddenly we're going to have 45-foot buildings right up to the sidewalk lining a majority of the street. And people didn't used to think that could take place on Rantoul Street, but that certainly, has become a possibility there. And so I think that we have to act and make a recommendation on this particular proposal, but I think we need a little more time, at least, to step back and say, okay, what are some of the big issues? What's a reasonable timeline to be able to make decent recommendations that we can support with fact? For example, an analysis of parking availability within the CC2 district to determine what is available and when we would hit gridlock, and whether or not, or whatever changes we make should be reflected in what the parking would allow. And the question of affordability. We all want more affordable units, but we know that this is a complex game, not game necessarily, but almost roll of the dice to see whether or not we make changes now, and we won't know what those changes bring us in 4 to 5 years. So I think that we should keep this open, do some sort of a call, because I don't think that a lot of publicity has been not the same way or not even close to the master plan. And I do, Andrea, to your point, see the through line. I do see the through line. I see some of those decisions and investigations there making a lot of sense. But for parking, for historic preservation, for whether or not the MBTA's Community Act and our obligations under it are going to be thwarted by not being expansive on Cabot Street? I mean, those are all outstanding questions. I think we should keep it open for at least one more meeting and do a call to action for people from certain areas to come and talk to us about these proposals.
Just to add to that, if we're looking at further considerations, we have climate action and mitigation to consider as well.
Most certainly. I'd be interested in be able to at least have a conversation about adaptive reuse of buildings and the impact on sustainability.
I think
and
our
things like
scope
that.
here is really
Yeah, I was
blowing
just
up.
going to say, I
but
think.
that's-
I will not have that stuff for you within a year.
Yeah, I think.
So, I mean, that's.
Okay, one at a time.
I mean, all of these things are interrelated, and we have to think about them as increments of change, not one whole package. If we want to do everything at once, we will do nothing. And I caution you to that.
And I think to a large extent, that's what the master plan dealt with,
Yes.
these issues. But I think, I'm a little concerned, not a little, a lot, we're going far afield here. You know, we can't, I don't think this zoning, proposed zoning amendment, I'm not sure how it relates to what we can do to look at historical buildings. I don't know what we can do in relation to this to look at climate action, that sort of thing. I don't think this can be as comprehensive as people would like. I just don't see how it can be. I do want to ask Mr. DeFrenza if you'd like to speak before we make any type of a decision. Can you like do 5 minutes or less? Please, your name and your address?
Hello, everybody. Andrew DeFranza, 11 Weber Avenue, Ward 2, Goat Hill.
Welcome to the fray.
Thank you, sir. Delighted to be here. Keep on my coat just in case. Would you like me to speak to something specific or generally?
Did you,
or-
well, I don't want you to think that I'm forcing you to speak, but if
Not
you'd
at all.
like to speak on any part of these proposed
Sure.
zoning amendments offered by planning director,
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to give you the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think probably everybody knows, but for the sake of discussion and folks on screen, I'm from Harbor Light Homes, formerly Harbor Light Community Partners. So our goals are pretty straightforward and consistent. We're always interested in affordability as much as we can get, as often as we can get, in as many places as we can get. So it's not hard to predict us where we're going and when we're going there, but how we do that varies. So I will say that we do like two features of the proposed change. We do like the change in AMI level from the mix of 60% and 80% AMI to 60% AMI. At a big picture level, 80% AMI units are difficult to value from our perspective. They are good for gentrification mitigation long term, meaning as the market expands and gets out of control, someday you're glad you have those. But if you have a chance to do something, you want to do a little more than that. So I like the move from 80 to 60. And I like the other thing that we like is the percentage increase, so which is modest but significant. So those are the two features that we have been most excited about. There was a question, and I'm not sure where it is at this point, Darlene, but there was a question about the trigger for unit size and applicability from 6 to 4. And there were some questions recently about how that might affect smaller scale developers. And I think that's actually quite a good point. And that's not one I would personally or organizationally that we would go to war over, so to speak. I think there is a lot of concern for the smaller scale developers, which we are not generally. Preferably, though occasionally that happens, but so we understand why that concern was raised and are supportive of it. If it just stayed at 6 units, that's actually quite a good number as we see in the region, and I don't think that's the biggest issue. I think the biggest issue are percentages and AMI levels.
Would you agree that it creates a disincentive for somebody looking to do a small development?
I would, though I think generally the smaller developers, for it to create a disincentive, they would probably have to understand what it was going to do to their pro forma and how it was going to, and what the compliance was going to require. I think it's less about the disincentive because I think they probably won't know what they're getting into, and so they won't be deterred, but eventually it will be difficult for them to comply, and it creates a burden in some ways anytime you have a smaller scale or volume of units, it's very difficult economically, even for us, to manage that. So the bigger the scale, the bigger the boat, the bigger the wave you can take, and the smaller the boat, the smaller. So I think I'm sympathetic to them, even though that's not something we generally do, and I think I can understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Great.
my quick version, but I'm
Thank you
happy
so
to
much.
take questions if you like.
I've got one.
Sarah?
So we heard comments tonight in regard to deepening the affordability from 80% to 60, that, given in a lot of the larger projects we've seen that the other units subsidizing, that there isn't other public funding, they're being subsidized. There was a concern raised tonight that that functionally, we were even presented with math, that functionally you could see that increase to the market rate units then ripple into the rest of the market, sort of then raise market across the board for even other properties that aren't even in this district, right? So I wonder if you'd want to respond to that concern. I think part of the hesitancy you heard in the room as you were walking in were comments like that sort of suggested there could be unintended consequences actually to the goal that many of us share, which is to create more affordability. And I think there's been some hesitancy to act and want to anticipate those unintended consequences.
Yeah, I'm glad to know that. I thought the hesitancy was about me walking in, so it was.
It was not about you.
It does happen from time. It does have. See, there you go. It does happen from time to time, depending on where I am. But it's a good question. I believe Derek and I have had this conversation over the years a number of times. I don't think there's a way to predict it. Whether, and I'm assuming everybody follows the math, right? It sets a precedent, it proves market, and that affects everything else. I think it's possible that could be happening. I think the challenge we're in now regionally, Beverly as well, but just sort of greater Boston, is what you see is this fragmenting of the market where you have market units that are very high cost and then housing units that are controlled either through a funding mechanism or a regulatory mechanism like inclusionary zoning. And then the middle is just it's impossible. And you're seeing a lot of that. So, of course, I'm interested in protecting the one lane, and that's how I spend most of my time. But at a big picture level, you could make the argument that the disruption to the overall market is challenging. And I think that's not unfair. Whether or not this is still the best option, I think is interesting. And I'm always going to, I'm not objective, which I always say, right? I'm always going to land on how do I protect people in that lane. But I wish there was a more balanced way to spread cost and opportunity so that we didn't have to do what essentially is, much higher costs and some modest cost, and then nothing in the middle, which the market now cannot produce. And frankly, we cannot produce it from an affordable housing standpoint. We also cannot produce middle. Right? It doesn't. It's the math is almost impossible. So
I mean, I wonder if that gives almost extra weight to not disrupting the ability of a smaller developer to produce small.
I think so.
Does that actually add extra weight to not, to being extra careful with the piece that the other piece that we're discussing, which is to really want to allow folks to create 3 units, 4 units where they can without having to.
Right.
As much as I would like everyone to develop affordable housing
Right.
exclusively, perhaps, given our needs, it may be that that's an area where we want to not.
Yeah. And they're the least able to manage. The compliance is painful, right? The economics gets weird. They're the least able to deal with it, right? It seems the least fair from an equity standpoint to require that. And they're also, a lot of those folks, if they're doing it, they're really strapping that together, right? So it's not easy what they're trying to do. So it's sort of like my view is sort of let them do it, and that'll help mitigate some of the risk. It doesn't, though, deal with your previous question, which is, are we going to set precedent of market higher that's then going to create more higher cost units? And again, I come down on the side of I still want to be able to create as much control over as many units that create affordable access as possible, because I think that's the most vulnerable group. But that's me, right? That's my day and evening, like right now.
A couple of quick questions, if I may.
Quick being the operative word.
Okay. So we had a little bit of discussion earlier about whether we should be looking at new units or all units, and coming especially to the smaller developers. So if you have someone who has 3 units and they're adding, 3 more, or they have 4 units, they're adding 4 more, are they brought to the level where they have to comply, or are affected by this? That's one. And then just very quickly, in terms of the burden, communities like Beverly, even though I know that many people, I do, I talk about affordable housing all the time and that sort of thing. I think that we do a good job of it here in Beverly, comparatively. And I'm wondering your thoughts quickly on whether the MBTA Communities Act is going to make things a little bit more even for communities like ours who have been out in front and help settle the waves a little bit and create less of a gap between the lower cost and the higher cost units. Okay.
Great question. The second one. Also, how long have you been the vice chair? I feel like I owe you a congratulations. I didn't notice that until I saw your congratulations.
Baby steps, just barely.
We did for him.
You all voted on that. That's what I was going to ask. Congratulations, Terry. So to your 2 questions, I would err on new units. Because I think it's fair with the logic that this is to say, if it was an adaptive reuse, in my mind, those were all new units, even though that's an existing building. So if you had a housing unit, it's a unit. It's sort of grandfathered in that way. If you have new units created, they should be their own subject. Now, if that's created in what was previously not housing, they're all new units, even though the building is existing. So I would rely on the cap or the trigger of volume of units for the floor and on the volume of new units to create that standard. That's just my opinion. On the MBTA side, we, as you know, we're huge fans and supporters, instigators, formally and informally on that front. I think that's exactly what it's going to do. I think our hope is, and I'm assuming everybody's sort of familiar with it at some level, our hope is that regionally, and by, we're interested in sort of 20 communities, but it's of course 185 or something, that it will create some equity long term. It's going to take a while. Because it will essentially create, the Chair mentioned before, by right, it's going to create more by right opportunity in more places, and the developers will find that. And that will create more opportunity, which hopefully will have the inverse effect of your question, which is it will spread that out. I think long term, it is the best thing that's happened in zoning, in 50 years. Now we'll see. It's going to take a lot of time to implement. I assume there's going to be litigation. There already has been some. But I expect it's going to work, and I expect that's what's going to happen.
Okay, I have got to cut the conversation here.
Okay.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You're
Could
very
listen to
welcome.
you all night, and I wish we had more time, but I have now 45 minutes to do.
Sure.
Well, we have 45 minutes to do the rest of our work.
I'm always happy to come back. Lovely to
All right,
see
we
you.
have to make decision, folks. Darlene, can you, and I'm sorry to ask you this again, but my head's spinning right now. What are our options?
I mean, I don't think the board is in any position to make a recommendation at this point, from what I've heard. I think your option is to, send a letter to city council that you need more time to craft a recommendation. Whether or not you want to close the public hearing is kind of up to you, and just,
Does that more time, does that fall within a range? Does it fall within a specific, by a
well, the
specific deadline?
city council has 90 days to act from the date of the public hearing.
Okay.
Well, they closed their
Doesn't
public
matter.
hearing.
If we
so-
closed it today, it's a week, so whatever.
Okay, so we don't have to have a meeting next week to follow up on this thing, or the day after Christmas or something like that? Huh?
No, I mean, I don't think that's, you could. I don't think that's really prudent, given the time.
Yeah, no, neither do I. I just want to make sure we don't have to.
But no, it's, 90 days, we have into the next year.
But we could close the public hearing and continue to discuss.
You can.
Or we could leave the public hearing, continue the public hearing, and I don't know if that's a particular message to the council that we're still considering.
Question again, what comes out of continuing the public hearing? Who are we going to hear from?
Except,
No,
I'm just suggesting
say
that perhaps
close
it's a
it.
message to the council that we're still under.
I think the fact that we're asking for more time
For the
allows them to
recommendation?
know that we're serious and looking at this with some serious focus.
I don't disagree.
If we were to close the meeting tonight, but then still receive letters and comments and things like that we can consider at our next meeting.
I don't think we can if
don't
it-
think
the
we can
hearing's
close the
not-
public
the
hearing.
public hearing's closed.
So that would be my feeling for keeping it open till the next meeting, closing it next meeting, and then discussing.
In case there's any further correspondence, you mean?
Do we really think there's going to be any additional correspondence? We've had two, this is now day 2 of our public hearing.
I guess I don't,
I don't see the reason to keep it open, Madam Chair.
Is that a motion?
I welcome a motion on this.
I move to close the public hearing.
I second.
All right, and we have to do this by a roll call since Rodney's on the phone with us?
Yes, please.
All right. Is there any further discussion on whether or not to open or keep open the public hearing or to close it? Though I think we've talked about it pretty
No, Madam
extensively.
Chair.
Okay, that being said, I'll call the roll. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller,
no.
Rodney Sinclair,
No.
Andrea Toulouse,
Yes.
Derek Beckwith,
No.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. The yeses have it. Public hearing's closed. How about a motion to send a letter to the city council requesting additional time to make a recommendation? Do people think we could make a recommendation one way or the other at our January meeting, January 18th?
Yes.
Hope so.
Do you want to have a special meeting for it? I don't know.
I was going to say, could we enumerate what our, I realize we're very short on time, but I wonder if we could enumerate what our actual what is it that would keep us from discussing these items? I actually feel like the last conversation was quite helpful to me. I'm very clear right now on what I, at least personally, feel like I'd like to see different than what Ms. Wynn has proposed. And I think we have been asked to comment on what was put in front of us, not on something that was put in front of us at 4 o'clock this afternoon, but really what was immediately put in front of us. And I mean, I feel like I could do that, but I recognize voting line by line tonight might not be in the cards, but I think it would be helpful to enumerate maybe what would keep us from that. What is it that we still need to all come to agreement on so that we can act in January?
I agree. I'm ready to act tonight, but I'm getting the impression that others aren't, so, and I respect that. But maybe those who don't want to act tonight could answer Sarah.
Madam Chair, I can just say that if I had to act tonight, I would not vote in favor of what's in front of me because I just don't have enough information. And I'm not sure that it's what is necessary to achieve whatever the particular goal is, which again, I'm not 100% sure the goal is even something that is what we want holistically as a community. I understand I've heard that some people ... So, but if I were forced to, if I had to, I would have to vote it down. Me, I think there needs to be a step back. And I think I'm probably in the minority in this sense that I think we're moving way too fast. I don't understand why we're going in this direction per se. And I would like a lot more people to be part of the conversation.
Okay, I'd welcome a motion for a letter to the city council suggesting that we need until our next meeting to offer them a recommendation.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second?
I'll call the roll. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller, Rodney Sinclair,
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse,
Yes.
Derek Beckwith,
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes. Okay. Thank you. So, Darlene, will you take care of that letter, or?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on. I lost my agenda. Oh, here it is. Good God. We're never going to get through this in half an hour. No. No.
Or what?
All right,
lights go
next
out?
agenda
What's-
item is continued public hearing, site plan review number 156-22, and inclusionary housing number 21-22 for the properties at 26, 28, 28R, Cabot Street, 4-6 and 8 Rantoul Street, and a portion of 10 Rantoul Street. The applicant is Southwest Rantoul Gateway LLC. And I see Attorney Samasco was appearing on behalf of the applicant.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members
you.
of the board. I know time is tight. The good news is I think that we should be able to get through the presentation this evening on this project fairly quickly. When we were last here, we reviewed with you, most significantly, some changes that were proposed in terms of the traffic circulation in and out of the project from Rantoul Street and Goat Hill Lane. And we also showed some more visual images of the project and answered some other questions from the board. I think we had wrapped up that meeting with the notion that we would only be coming back at this meeting to review, hopefully, a parking and traffic recommendation for the project, which I'm happy to say we do have. We presented the latest peer review response and to the Parking and Traffic Commission yesterday. And after consideration of that response with a presentation by the peer reviewer during that meeting, the commission voted to issue a recommendation with conditions that have been agreed upon by the applicant. So we have sort of closed that loop, if you will, on the project, and happy to give you an overview of what the main comments were at this morning's, or excuse me, yesterday morning's meeting. The peer reviewer had noted some concerns about turning radius within the parking layouts, both within the garage parking as well as the surface parking lot. There were several communications back and forth between GPI the civil engineers for the project as well, and with the peer reviewers at Vanass. And they concluded that their concerns had been met. Significantly, they recognize that this project is going to be professionally managed, and it's mostly residential, so that the same tenants will be using the same parking spaces. And there will be management that will be sure that SUVs are not squeezed into the tightest spaces on the lot. And I think that both the commissioners and the peer reviewer were satisfied by that explanation. Similarly, they expressed concerns about making sure that there was a good snow management plan, and again, those concerns were raised. There was concern about signage for the entrance to Rantoul Street, and plans were revised to show the signage that was requested. I think that's sort of the high level of the issues. Those were the sorts of things that were discussed during the meeting. And I think that Darlene had provided members with a copy of the recommendation and the specific conditions as well. So we feel as though we have presented to the board all aspects of the project at this point. And would be happy to answer any remaining questions, but we would also be pleased if the board felt ready to take a vote this evening.
Questions for Attorney Samasco and her team? Derek?
I'm asking, in particular, I'm looking at the conditions, which I've just read from the Parking and Traffic Commission, and you mentioned snow removal, maintaining clear access, all that sort of stuff. I don't see those in the conditions. Was that something that was agreed to as part of the back and forth on,
Yes.
and is memorialized in those documents?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
I'm just making
thank
sure.
you.
It's also, snow removal is also in one of these, is one of our standard conditions, planning board, but it was referenced in the reviews and the peer reviews and the responses to that. So that's, I specifically wrote the letter to reflect those.
Other questions?
Just going down the list, I'm not clear how you park bicycles between the cars. What's the plan there?
We had a very lengthy discussion about this yesterday, but what that refers to is there was one member of the Parking and Traffic Commission who was very concerned that if you put bike racks right in front of a vehicle in the parking garage on the wall, for example, that's how they have been done in various projects, that they would not be easily accessible for all tenants, and suggested that they be offset so that the racks are now placed between cars, not directly in front of a car.
Oh, between the noses.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Sorry. No.
Like,
On the wall, where as you park in, it would be on the wall in front of you.
If I could ask another question?
Please?
And I just wanted to clarify for my mind, in terms of the way you've handled the entering and exiting the site, no left-hand turn from Rantoul going northbound, and is there a flow? Is all traffic now coming out of the site onto Goat Hill Avenue, or are some cars able to? That driveway is just a one-way now?
Yes.
Okay, one-way in from Rantoul.
Street was never an exit.
Okay, all right,
Always to a signalized intersection.
got it. And the traffic report, obviously, because you're sitting here tonight saying everything's been approved, handles the flow of traffic. And that road from the site itself, the driveway is one way up until the entrance to the garage. It's two-way. I mean, two-way, and then, yep. Okay,
Get closer so they can hear you.
thank you.
Chair?
Yes, Wayne?
I'm not too familiar, I guess, with the idea of the transit shuttle that the city's going to establish someday. What's your understanding of how that would work?
We had a long discussion about this yesterday as well, and I believe that where we came out is that the applicant is going to make a $15,000 donation at the time of the,
Of course, you mean annually.
no.
Oh,
This is a one-time donation to the city. It's in lieu of what was formerly a much smaller annual donation to the regional transit, the regional TMA, that wasn't terribly productive in terms of transportation planning. And so what this condition now is seeking to do is to create sort of a pool of resources to assist with the city of Beverly launching a program, whether it's a pilot or an actual program for shuttle on demand, similar to what the city of Salem has. So the applicant has agreed to make that contribution. If for some reason the shuttle is not launched, then the use of that $15,000 would have to be used for some alternative traffic management or planning purpose approved by the Parking and Traffic Commission.
Anything else from members of the board? Wayne?
just taking down the list here, I guess you might as well comment on the number 6, the tenants in the building are not eligible to participate in the City of Beverly residential parking permit program.
This has been in the last 3
Yeah,
recommendation letters. It's
they're parking on
been
site.
specifically requested by the mayor.
Well, then I won't argue with that.
The notion of that is that, we want the responsibility of the residential parking to remain with the new projects rather than, in some instances, not the developer's subject here. They've raised the price of parking so significantly that people no longer park in the garage
Yeah.
of their building. So.
Yep.
Okay, is there anything else from members of the public here present who wish to be heard? No? Anybody at home watching us by, what is it, Google Meet or remote, Zoom, whatever it is, wish to, BevCam, wish to be heard on the whole thing? Okay, I'm a little hesitant, but I'm going to say it. Should we close this public hearing?
Madam Chair, I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Sarah. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, if I can find my agenda with all your names, I can call the roll. Sarah Bartley?
Yes.
Ellen Flannery?
Yes.
George Gomes?
Yes.
Wayne Miller?
Yes.
Rodney Sinclair?
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse?
Yes.
Derek Beckwith?
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes. This public hearing is closed. We now move to vote on the merits of this project. I would welcome a motion on this if we would.
I'll try it. A lot of reading.
All right, George.
All right. Madam Chair, move to approve site plan review number 156-22 for 26, 28, and 28R Cabot Street, 4 through 6, 8, and 8 Rantoul Street, and a portion of 10 Rantoul Street. It's map 1, lots 79 and 80, map 4, lots 160, 161, 162, and 163 by the applicant Southwest Rantoul Gateway LLC, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the project shall be constructed in accordance with the site development plan set entitled Planning Board Site Plan Set Southwest Southwest Rantoul Gateway LLC, Rantoul Street and Cabot Street, Beverly, Mass. 01915. Prepared by Beverly Crossing. Prepared by SV Design LLC, 126 Dodge Street, Beverly, Mass. 01915. And the Morin Cameron Group, 66 Elm Street, Danvers, Mass. 01923. 28 sheets, C index, dated 8/8/22 and revised through 12/7/22. Including sheets C1 through C8, 8 sheets revised on 12/7/22, and incorporated into the response to comments dated December 7th, 2022. Said plans are attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Number 2, subject to compliance with all the conditions contained in the comment letter submitted by the various department heads, boards, commissions, which are attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. A, letter dated August 25th, 2022 from Bill Burke, Health Department. B, letter dated September 23rd, 2022 from Victoria Healy on behalf of the Design Review Board. C, letter draft dated December 13th, 2022 from Richard Benevento, Chair of the Parking and Traffic Commission. D, letter dated September 7th, 2022 from Captain Jake Kraling on behalf of the Fire Prevention Office. E, comments in Central Square Permitting System from Assistant City Engineer Lisa Chandler dated August 18th, 2022. 3, to the extent permissible and approved under Fair Housing in the Department of Housing and Community Development, the applicant will honor any local preference should the City of Beverly administration request it, up to the DHCD maximum of 70%. DHCD will require that this request be made in collaboration between the applicant and the city. Can I incorporate the planning board standard conditions by reference? Is that a thing we can do?
Yes.
And then I will also incorporate our standard conditions by reference, please. I don't want to read those.
Okay.
I'm-
I would love a second.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller, Ronnie Sinclair,
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse,
Yes?
Derek Beckwith,
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes. Okay, George, you're not off the hook. We have the inclusionary housing
I
permit.
got it. Madam Chair, move to approve inclusionary housing number 21-22 for 26, 28, and 28R Cabot Street, 4 through 6 and 8 Rantoul Street, and a portion of 10 Rantoul Street, map 1, lots 79 and 80, map 4, lots 160, 161, 162, and 163 by applicant Southwest Rantoul Gateway LLC, subject to the following condition. To the extent permissible and approved under Fair Housing in the Department of Housing and Community Development, the applicant will honor any local preference should the City of Beverly administration request it, up to the DHCD maximum of 70%. DHCD will require that this request be made in collaboration between the applicant and the city.
I have a motion. Is there a second, please?
Second?
Ooh, I'll give it to Beckwith. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller,
Yes.
Ronnie Sinclair,
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse,
Yes.
Derek Beckwith,
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes.
Thank you, members of the planning board.
Thank you.
Make us proud.
Did you say 7 minutes? No, is that in the minutes? Oh,
It isn't.
okay. Could I have a motion, please, to come out of the public hearing?
So moved.
Seconded?
I'll call the roll. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller,
Yes.
Ronnie Sinclair,
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse,
Yes.
Derek Beckwith,
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes. Okay. We have come out of public hearing. We are reconvening our meeting. Next matter is the preliminary subdivision plan for 218 Cabot Street, Leggett McCall Properties LLC.
Good evening, members of the board. Miranda Samasco for Leggett McCall Properties LLC. We also have Charlie Ware, a civil engineer, who is joining us on Google Meet this evening. You
Mr.
have,
Masco, we're going to start charging you rent for that seat.
I think that it will be free for a while after this evening, actually. So what you have before you is a preliminary subdivision plan. I realized there was a typo in my cover sheet to the board. I had incorrectly stated that there were 2 lots created, but members of the board who reviewed the plan will realize right away that there are actually 3 lots being created by this proposed preliminary plan. The project site, as members understand, is the project that was just approved at the Family Dollar project. So I think you can surmise that the purpose of this filing is to comply with the provisions for a zoning change in anticipation of the possibility of zoning amendments being passed. So that is the sole purpose of this plan. As you may, I know some members of the board have been on the board during other preliminary plan zoning freeze procedures. But basically what the law requires is that a preliminary subdivision plan be filed, and that within 7 months from that filing, a definitive plan be submitted and endorsed by the planning board. And once that is done, the zoning is, that's in effect on the date of the preliminary plan filing, is effectively frozen for 7 years after the definitive plan. Importantly, the case law is quite clear that the layout shown on this plan is nothing that needs to be built. So the freeze pertains to the land shown on the plan, not the development shown on the plan. So for that reason, the design of this potential roadway has been done it's been done as simply as possible to not require any waivers by the board. And the configuration may not make a lot of sense, but it complies with the subdivision control regulations and is enough to constitute a preliminary plan filing. And with that overview, happy to answer any questions, and Charlie can make a brief presentation if you like over what is proposed, but I'll leave that to your discretion.
I mean, this is in essence, is it fair to say it's a placeholder?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and Chair, just as out of context, so you and Bob know, I didn't provide staff reports in this case, but I provided them with the subdivision regulations that outline the process for preliminary plans, as well as Chapter 48 regarding zoning freezes, just so that the board had all the meat of that, rather than me regurgitating it. And basically, the action on a preliminary plan is not a public hearing, and it is, the board could take comments if the chair chooses. Public comment, but it also, the board can make recommendations or suggestions or take no action or approve. There's really kind of.
Or disapprove.
Or disapprove.
I mean,
And
it
it still is,
doesn't-
and
it doesn't
it still
matter.
is, and they still would have to follow with a
Fortunately.
definitive plan. So, that's kind of what the board has to consider.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I guess this is an internal question. It would be somewhat disingenuous, since we've approved this project, for us to not approve this tonight. I'm asking that rhetorically, and that seems to be my feeling.
Thank you. I mean, Darlene, this meets all of the necessary, and Attorney Smasko meets all of the necessary requirements for a preliminary subdivision plan.
Yes, there's no waivers, like the roadway.
Right.
Is the important thing, which you could also approve a preliminary plan that had waivers, or you could make recommendations. Yes, correct. And you could even approve one that required waivers, or make recommendations on one that required waivers, but this is a straightforward plan that meets the filing requirements and the content requirements, and doesn't require any waivers.
Here's a question. Is there any consequence to our approving it?
No, effectively not.
Because it really doesn't matter.
The preliminary plan, it's the process is built for basically an initial consultation, if it's a real-world development. And certainly, as Darlene said, it's within the board's discretion to make comments if you thought this was really going to be built.
Okay. Is there anything else for Attorney Samasco or her team? Okay, then I guess I would welcome a motion on this.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I move that we approve the board approve the preliminary plan application for 218 to 224 Cabot Street, filed by Leggett McCall Properties LLC.
Just to make sure that we have the
Endorsed.
the terminology correct, you meant a preliminary subdivision plan, correct?
Subdivision, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, sorry, I was just reading that.
that's
so,
okay.
yeah.
Is there a second, please? Thank you.
Second?
Seconded by Ms. Flannery. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Sarah Bartley?
Yes.
Ellen Flannery?
Yes?
George Gomes?
Yes.
Wayne Miller?
Yes.
Roddy Sinclair?
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse?
Yes.
Derek Beckwith?
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Darlene, for this. Thank you.
Gosh, we might make this.
See?
13 minutes.
You have a little faith.
We can do it.
All right,
getting there,
preliminary
Ms. L.
well, I also don't want us to rush, given the,
No.
what we're doing, so. Our next agenda item is preliminary subdivision plan for 45, 47, 53 Cabot Street and 5 Union Street. The applicant is Gregory Ward, filed 11/28/22. Mic on, please, Mr. Griffin. Mic on. There we go. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. So this is a similar approach to accomplish a zoning freeze. The wards have been doing some preliminary planning on reuse of the ward's greenhouse property. So the land involves 4 parcels of land that are owned by the wards. The greenhouse property and an adjacent property at the corner of Cabot and Stone Street, which is sort of where the L-shaped building is that forms Ward's greenhouse and their associated storage facilities. The residence is at 47 Cabot Street and 5 Union Street on the adjacent Union Street. So it's all one contiguous piece of land. It's pretty flat in that particular area. It's all pretty well developed with the parking lot and the buildings. The total acreage is 0.9 acres. So the proposal is to bring in a new fully conforming subdivision roadway, meets all of the subdivision standards. It's got a 120-foot outside diameter right-of-way. It's got a 100-foot paved cul-de-sac inside, and that provides access to the 0.9 acres from Stone Street. There are 4 existing parcels. There will be 4 proposed parcels. Obviously, the lot lines change as a result of the new cul-de-sac layout. There's no hindrances to access off of Stone Street. It's straight, it's level. There's plenty of sight distance up and down that street, so getting in and out of the land is really no problem. There's plenty of utilities on Cabot Street, Stone Street, Union Street. We're proposing to add a hydrant in the cul-de-sac and a sewer manhole in the cul-de-sac to provide access to the hypothetical lots. And we've got a drainage connection with subsurface disposal chambers leading out to Cabot Street. All the types of improvements that you see normally in roadway subdivision projects. And with that, I'd be happy to address any questions.
Questions for Mr. Griffin, please?
Mr. Griffin, you mentioned the word hypothetical in there, and I'm curious as to whether or not we would expect something along these lines, or if it's still up in the air as to exactly what we're going to have.
No, I think this is a zoning freeze plan. The wards do not, it's highly unlikely that they will build out this particular plan as drawn on paper.
being honest with us.
Yeah.
That's the way we
Appreciate
roll.
it.
It's probably a good thing.
Appreciate
It's not
that
very
the transparency. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions for Mr. Griffin? Darlene, can you confirm that this meets all of the requirements necessary for an acceptable preliminary subdivision plan?
Yes. I should have heard the squeaking chair. It's a signal. Yes, I've looked through it and I've confirmed that the preliminary plan meets the requirements of the subdivision without waivers and the content requirements of filing a preliminary plan.
Again, I think obviously this serves as a placeholder, a zoning freeze placeholder. Certainly, I don't discourage any questions, Mr. Griffin, but I'm not sure there's really anything to ask. So that being said, are there any questions for Mr. Griffin? Anything else? Okay, I'd welcome a motion on this matter, please.
Madam Chair, motion to approve the preliminary subdivision plan, 45, 47, 53 Cabot Street and 5 Union Street, applicant Gregory Ward, filed 11/28/22.
Thank you, George. The rookie stepping up.
You got to get out of here.
I love it, I
growing on
know.
me.
Can I get a second on that, please?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Seconded by Ms. Flannery. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller,
Yes.
Ronnie Sinclair.
Yes.
Thank you. Andrea Toulouse,
Yes.
Derek Beckwith.
Only because we didn't previously approve this project, I will vote no.
Okay. Ellen Hutchinson, yes.
Well, thank you all very much. and
Thank you,
good night.
Mr. Griffin. I haven't been wishing people happy holidays, so happy holidays to everybody, so.
Thank you.
All right. Next agenda item, let's see. Discussion on closed public hearings. I think we've done that. Set public hearing, if any. Reschedule the public hearing for the waiver of frontage and definitive subdivision plan 8 and 10 Dolph Avenue. The applicants are Andrew Rapisardo and Allison Rapisardo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
We had scheduled that for today's meeting and then we forgot to publish the legal notice, so we're asking
geez.
respectfully to reschedule it to a future public hearing. Thank goodness we didn't have time for it tonight.
Should we put it on for our January 18th
I
meeting?
think that would be respectful, yeah.
All right, I'd welcome a motion on that, please.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Can I get a second, please? Seconded by George. I'll read the roll. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller,
Yes.
Ronnie Sinclair,
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse,
Yes.
Derek Beckwith,
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes. Thank you. Sarah, we sound like we're losing you. Sound like you're fading.
Am I?
Our next agenda item is set the public hearing for special permit number 183-22 and site plan review number 159-22 for the property located at 128 Boulder Lane. The applicant is Oak Forest Farm LLC.
If you want, I'll just give you a little context of this.
Sure, please do.
You see this parcel off Route 128 when you're driving from Essex Street towards Grapevine. The special permit is because it's in the Water Supply Protection Overlay District. It's a proposal for a contractor's garage with no water and sewer connections. So it's there's not much that we have been in favor of them doing there. It's accessed through Wenham. It does not have Beverly Salem water. It does not have sewer and water service, so they'll have to get their own and kind of do well water and things like that. So,
Okay.
just so you know, that's the context of what the plan is. I think
Okay, should we set this for January 18th?
so.
All right.
So moved.
Moved by,
Second?
okay, hold on. Let's see, that was motion by Flannery, second by Beckwith, all in, I can't do all in favor. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery.
Yes.
George Gomes,
Yes.
Wayne Miller,
Yes.
Rodney Sinclair,
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse,
Yes.
Derek Beckwith,
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes, thank you. Minutes.
Madam Chair, I've reviewed both August and September. I don't have my notes for it, Ms. Nguyen, but I will submit them to her as
Okay.
amended tomorrow.
Would you consider them to be of substance, or would you consider them to be typographical in nature?
Typographical in nature.
Okay. Anybody else with any amendments to any of the minutes?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'd welcome a motion on this, please. Yeah, take it home.
I move to approve the minutes for the August 16th and September 13th, 2022 Planning Board meeting as amended.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Beckwith. Sarah Bartley,
Yes.
Ellen Flannery,
Yes.
George Gomes.
Yes.
Wayne Miller.
Yes.
Rodney Sinclair.
Yes.
Andrea Toulouse.
Yes.
Derek Beckwith.
Yes.
Ellen Hutchinson, yes. Forgive me, do we have October 5 minutes? No?
No. In the packet.
Well, it's 9:56.
You had 4 more minutes to talk about zoning.
New business, Ms. Ellen. Madam Chair. New business?
No, no new business. We are,
New business. Happy holidays.
we have new business?
No.
Oh,
Happy
God, you
holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays to everybody. Thank you again, as always. Thank you all very much. This is like heavy-duty stuff.
I heard Andrea motion to adjourn.
I know she did. Oh, you want me? That's your way of telling me to shut up?
No, I'm just letting you know.
All right.
That was her first motion.
Somebody second it? All right, Sarah Bartley,
Yes, she did.
Flannery,
Yes.
Gomes,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Sinclair,
Yes.
Toulouse,
Yes.
Beckwith.
Yes.
Hutchinson. We are done and out of here. Woo-hoo-hoo!
Happy holidays, everyone.
Motion to adjourn.
You too, Rodney.
Rodney.
Have a wonderful holiday.